So long as we
Get in the,
so long
and
as we
try to get into the best corner I could. The time is now 12:30, so we'll begin our meeting. The meeting is now open to the public and we have started recording. We'll begin with an introduction to our Spanish interpretation, as well as our language justice statement from Tanya Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Tanya, and I'm the interpreter for the Environmental Justice Program at CDPHE. Today, I'm working with my colleague, Valentina. I'm going to read the Zoom instructions and the language justice statement, first in Spanish, and then I'll repeat it in English. Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Tania y soy la intérprete del Programa de Justicia Ambiental del Departamento de Salud Pública y Medio Ambiente de Colorado. Hoy estoy trabajando con mi colega Valentina. Antes de comenzar, quiero asegurarme de que todos y todas hayan seleccionado el idioma adecuado en Zoom. Si prefieren escuchar la presentación en español, hagan clic en el globito que aparece en la parte inferior de la pantalla de la computadora y seleccionen español bajo interpretación. Si están usando un teléfono celular o una tableta, hagan clic en los 3 puntos que están a la derecha donde dice More o Más y elijan el español como su idioma de preferencia. Las y los integrantes de la comunidad están invitados a hacer sus comentarios en español si así lo prefieren. Nuestra organización ha asumido el compromiso de fomentar la justicia lingüística. Invitamos a la comunidad a usar su idioma de preferencia para participar en la reunión. Les agradecemos que hablan lenta y pausadamente y que usen palabras comunes para que sea más fácil de interpretar. And English. Before we get started, I would like to direct everyone to the appropriate language channel on Zoom. If you would prefer to listen in Spanish, please click on the small globe at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. If you are on a tablet or phone, click the 3 dots to the right of your screen that says More and select Spanish there. During the meeting, there may be community members who choose to give their comments in Spanish. If you are not bilingual, you will need to click the English option to be able to hear the interpretation. As an organization, we are committed to language justice. We would like to invite community members to participate in the meeting using their language of preference. In order to facilitate interpretation, please speak slowly, pause often, and use commonly understood vocabulary. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Tanya. Language interpretation is enabled. Board members, please make your language selection. Next, I'm going to review some quick housekeeping items for today. Please make sure that you've joined the meeting with either your phone or computer audio. Board members and panelists can participate by raising their hand, which can be found at the bottom of the Zoom window. If you've joined by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Because this is an opportunity for board members to engage with CAA and department staff, we ask that all board members keep their cameras on. That said, feel free to turn it off if you need to step away to tend to something. Board members, please state your name and organization each time you speak. Also, if board members can make sure their chat settings are set to everyone when they're sharing feedback, that will ensure that everyone in the meeting can see their feedback and can participate. We are recording this meeting, and this will be posted to the advisory board webpage, which I have just linked to in the chat. There, you will also find meeting materials for today, including a Zoom guidance document. Non-board members will have an opportunity to speak during our public comment period. I will turn on the chat function during our scheduled break. At that time, you can send me your name and affiliation to join the list of those who will speak during the public comment time. As a reminder, these are the ground rules we have in place in order to have a productive meeting and ensure that everyone can hear from all advisory board members. I'll now go ahead and turn it over to Scott.
Great. Thanks so much, Brandon and Tanya, for providing the language justice statement and meeting logistics for today's meeting. So welcome everyone to Colorado's 29th Producer Responsibility Advisory Board meeting. I want to thank you for joining us today. My name is Scott Cassell. I am with the Product Stewardship Institute, and I am the facilitator for the advisory board. So let's start things off with a quick roll call. Board members, when I call your name, please raise your hand or give a nod, and we'll know you're here. Starting with, well, Liz Chapman, I understand you might be here 10 minutes late, so I may come back to Liz or look for her name in the chat there. Oh, you're
Scott,
there. There you are.
I made it. My worries were for naught. I am here and I am present. Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado, representing the nonprofit seat.
Excellent. We were monitoring you the whole way and you just slipped in under the gun. All right. Thank you so much. I understand Scott DeFife is absent today. Is that correct? Looks like. Okay. Non-front range local government seat, advisory board chair Gail Gary.
Yes, Gail Gary, City of Steamboat Springs City Council.
Thank
And
you,
I'm
Gail. Retailers Association seat, Chris House. Okay. Landfill with recycling seat, Barrett Jensen.
Good afternoon. I'm present.
Thank you. You're traveling, but you've made it. Thank you so much. All right. Murph seat, Rick Cater.
Present.
Thanks, Rick. Municipality seat, Caroline Mitchell.
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins, here.
Thank you, Caroline. County seat, Jake Neese.
Jake Neese, Erie County Commissioner, President.
Thanks, Jake. Environmental Justice seat, Junior Ortega.
Here.
Thanks, Junior. Mark Petrovich. Absent. Okay, that's the recyclable material hauler seat. Compost facility seat, Clinton Sander.
Yep, Clinton Sander here, A1 Organics.
Great, thank you. Packaging supplier seat, Scott Saunders.
Here.
Thank you, Scott. Non-voting department seat, Wolf Cray. Hi, Wolf.
Scott.
And non-voting PRO seat in the hot seat, Peter Hargreave.
Present.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll now move on to our business meeting. The first item of business is to approve the summary for the last meeting. That's meeting number 28, and also the technical work session number 3 summary. So let me ask if anyone has any feedback on this. All right, if not, then would someone like to make a motion to approve the meeting number 28 summary and the technical work session number 3 summary? This is the easy part, folks.
Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. I will make a motion to approve both the summary and the technical workshop
Thank
notes.
you.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, technical work session summary and meeting number 28 summary. Thank you, Clinton. And a second.
This is Gail Gary, City of Steamboat Springs City Council. I'll second that motion.
Great, thank you. Any opposed? Okay, then I'll assume all in favor and it's approved unanimously. Next, I'll go over our agenda and then we can dive into business. So today's agenda, as you see on the screen here, we're going to have hear from CAA, some updates on staff and also the consultation sessions that they've been running. Then we're going to hear about cost formula for reimbursement for collections, producer dues. Then we're going to take a 5-minute break. Then we'll get into service providers collaboration, public comment, and then meeting summary and next steps. So with that, I will turn it over to Pete to kick off the first topic, and hopefully the comment about being on the hot seat you take as just a joke because you always handle it quite well.
Thanks, Scott. And I'm happy to say that I'm going to share my time presenting with Yuri, who is the executive director, so that he can also enjoy the spotlight as well.
Thanks. That's so kind of you, Pete. Thanks.
You're welcome. So maybe if we can move to next slide, and I'll let Yuri cover the next 2 slides.
Yeah, I got 2 really exciting staffing announcements for CAA that I wanted to share with this group. This just went public yesterday. So some of you may have seen this, but I'm thrilled to announce that CAA has hired the CEO for the organization. It's Jeff Filko. Some of you may have met Jeff in your previous engagements. I know I've seen him around in the recycling world for a bunch of decades now. He's most recently is president CEO of ID Images, leading manufacturer of converted product labels. Prior to that, he was CEO of Tetra Pak, US and Canada, and he also was CEO for Vietnam, VP of Sustainability for Southeast Asia and Oceania over his time at Tetra Pak. And prior to that, which is really exciting for us at CAA, since he's got a lot of experience in the operations of recycling systems. So working at REAP Community, container recycling, and waste management as well. Jeff starts on the 20th. So in 6 days, he isn't here, but we did make the announcement, and I'm sending him emails daily already. So really excited to have him on board. Next slide, please, Pete. And then equally exciting for us here in the state is we hired some state staff, which is great. Some of these names may be familiar to you all as well. So we've got 3 folks. One of them, Eric, just started on Monday. So he's brand new. The other 2, Rob and Moana, started like 2 weeks ago. So everyone on this list is pretty new, but I imagine that there'll be opportunities for you all to engage with them as the program plan progresses and we move closer toward implementation. Rob Ritz, most recent was at AMP Robotics. He also, he spent about 8 years or so at AMP. I think he was like employee 3 or 4 or 5, like a really early employee at AMP, and helped that organization grow. He was at Innosphere Ventures, NREL, and Toronto. So he's got a lot of experience, which I'm excited to tap into in the growth of organizations in the startup world. And of course, through AMP, quite a bit of information about MRFs, operations, packaging, AI, and that type of stuff. Eric Habor, most recently was at the CEDC through Circular Colorado. A bunch of you, like Liz, obviously know him. So a lot of people know him from previously being on Recycle Colorado board. Eric's been around in Colorado recycling for 20-ish years or so. I first got to interact with Eric when he was at Boulder County doing the HHW program there. He went over to CDPHE, did a little stint doing grants management at NREL, and I'm super psyched we got him. And then Moana, last but not least, Moana is our technical specialist. She has a background in mechanical engineering. I actually interacted with Moana maybe 6 years ago. I started to get to know her a little bit and worked with her to do some neural network training for the AI systems at AMP to pick some different materials from the recycling stream. So Moana has got a lot of background in data systems, process, as well as program management or project management. And she really understands packaging and their different components, which obviously is a key part of our EPR program. They might be listening in. So Rob, Eric, and Moana, if you're here and just listening, happy to have y'all. And I've got their emails up here for people on the board. Feel free to reach out to them, but I'm sure you'll get opportunities to connect with all 3 of these people in the future. Pete, I'll pass it back to you, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Sherry. Next slide over. So this slide's a bit outdated based on when we put it together, but we have now completed the first 4 consultation sessions. So on minimum recyclables list, education outreach, producer responsibility dues, and compostables. So the numbers for those are, you will see some adjustments. I know the producer dues was actually higher engagement, so we will update these numbers. And the compostables, I think we ended up having actually over 200 on that call. So it depends a little bit. We get late joiners registering. So we'll keep updating this information for you, but there has been a good participation. We are collecting information too on the number of participants from different types of sectors. We're getting information as well on where they may be located in the state or if they're out of state. So we are collecting all that information so we can include that as part of a general overview of who is participating in the meetings. On our website, we now have, we are including the fact sheets and the presentations, and we are starting to receive completed surveys back from the participants in those webinars. So substantial amount of participants so far within those initial meetings. A significant amount of feedback and questions that are being answered. So I think, let alone just on that first webinar, I think we had over 100 questions that came in, a smaller number for education and outreach, and then the number bumped up again for producer responsibility dues and composting that we did yesterday. So we are in the process of, we're going to take all of the feedback we receive, and we'll consolidate all of that information so that that is becomes part of the program plan submission. So there'll be an appendix that will deal specifically with the feedback that we receive as part of those sessions. And it certainly helps for us to get the feedback to understand different circumstances and different situations that may arise as part of those sessions. We did receive. Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt, a quick update on counts because I just got it. So I'll start at composting. I'll just go through this really quick. 201 reimbursement, 108 reimbursement 287, PCR 252, responsible end markets 207, 230, and then 141. So as people saying, yeah, these are constantly going upwards, which is great because we get more and more people signed up. Sorry, Pete, to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. So one common thread I would say in a number of the first meetings, we did have a lot of questions about producer registration and guidance. So we are trying to, as we move forward, trying to develop materials to make sure that we're answering some of those frequently asked questions and getting that feedback as soon as possible. So if we move a slide forward, so I've included as part of the deck just again, some of those frequently asked questions that we are working on to make sure that we have information back. There has been significant questions around registration. How do I know if I am a producer? What does the registration process look like? So as I said, we are trying to make sure that we're providing feedback to those questions as quickly as possible. At the end of the day, it is the requirement of those producers to get their own legal advice as to whether they are captured as part of the regulation. But we do also want to make sure that we are providing as much resources as possible to help them in aiding in that decision-making process. So if we just move one slide over, again, this just gets into a little bit of additional questions. We have set up a producer resource center on our website as well to provide more information to producers. And we are working on additional guidance materials that will be available to them as we move forward. So we're trying to provide as much clarity as quickly as possible to producers as we move forward. But obviously there is a lot of things currently happening, not only within Colorado, but happening within California, Oregon, and Maine. And we are trying to make sure that we're trying to apply a consistent approach as much as possible between states. I know some of you were a part of any of those sessions, so maybe I will open it up if there are any questions about those initial sessions to date, or if there was any feedback as part of those original sessions to date. Clinton.
Yeah, Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. And first question I had was, I just was kind of curious the intention around not recording the sessions for people to view them later if they can't make the time.
Thanks, Clinton. I think there have been, I think we've certainly heard through producer meetings that we've had in the past that some people would prefer to be able to ask questions and not have it recorded as to who is asking the question and what are they asking. So the decision was made to ensure that the presentations are all available for people to review and go through, but not to record the sessions.
Okay, and then yeah, because I've heard that feedback from multiple people. And then the second question is, and maybe tell me if this is appropriate time to ask this question, but some of the data that was presented in the composting yesterday, can I question some of that now, or would you prefer that to come in through the survey?
We're going to talk a little bit about the compost side in a little bit later on in the session. So
Okay.
happy to chat about that. That may make more sense to chat about it then. I know, Clinton, we've got a lot of slides to get through today. So, but we do have some of those slides that were included as part of that presentation. So happy to talk more specifically about that data. Yeah.
Okay, I'll jump in then. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Clinton. Are there any other outstanding questions or feedback from the board for Pete or Yuri on the cost formula for reimbursement for collections?
Sorry, just on the consultation sessions, Scott. We'll get into the reimbursement side in the next slides.
Sorry about that. On the board update, on the CAA updates. Any
And if
more
not,
questions?
I will, you know, I think as we move forward, I mean, we're still, as I said, getting the numbers counted through. We're trying to make sure we remove potentially where there may be overlap. For example, if one of the CA members has joined the call, we're just making sure we remove those numbers. So we'll have full that we can provide back to the group as we move forward to ensure some of the diversity in what those meetings look like. And as we start to get the surveys completed back, we can start to provide you know, additional information on at least some of the consolidated feedback.
Liz, you have another question?
Yes, Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. I was curious, Peter, if you had some numbers to share about survey responses. I appreciate that it looks like there has been robust attendance at the consultation sessions, and I'm hopeful that there is also robust response to the survey request.
So Liz, I think the first meeting we'd held, I think we've received about 36 comments. We are providing people a month to provide feedback, and we're looking at, do we need to do a follow-up email to just remind people to participate in the survey. So we're looking at that right now as to whether we need some additional nudge on that side to come back. I don't have the numbers as of today, but as I said, the response, at least we were starting to receive some responses back on some of those in our early sessions already. And obviously we did receive a lot of feedback as part of the actual session. So we're also chronicling all of those. So the comments we receive through the question and answers are being consolidated, plus the feedback we receive as part of the surveys.
Thank you, Liz. Are there any other questions on what Pete covered? Okay, thank you. So Pete, back over to you for the cost formula for reimbursement for collections.
Perfect. And I will, if we move another slide forward, and then one more, I think we'll hand things over. Oh, sorry, Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, just to pop in randomly. Rebecca Fisher with the Colorado Attorney General's office. I just wanted to remind everyone that before we jump into this position or this discussion, we will be sending out another request for you to update your conflict of interest form, because I know a lot of you all are probably going to potentially receive reimbursement under the act. So just wanted to flag that, keep that in mind when we're having our discussion, and that will be coming next round.
Great, thank you, Becca. Every time you jump in, we know to call on you right away. So don't worry. We got it. All right. Thanks. Barrett, you have a question.
So Barry Jensen, landfill with recycling, waste connections. Becca, I appreciate you bringing that up. Just curious as in for the context of today's meeting. And again, I really apologize if it's hard to hear me in this airport. This is primarily an advisory position, correct? However, when decisions need to be made, that is when it's important to disclose those conflicts. Am I reading that correctly? that today is more of an advisory, but in future meetings, when there's decisions to be made, those are important. And of course, I think it's important to note that if anyone thinks that there is a conflict anywhere, whether it's right, myself, to be totally transparent, it's okay to bring it up and talk about it.
Yes, yeah, that's the touchstone. I mean, generally, the ethics law requires an official act by the board members. Official act is generally a vote, but there's question as to whether that can include discussion. So obviously, we're not having a vote today, so there's a little bit less of a concern. And also the fact that the board is advisory. I think that's also important. So I don't think we'll have people recuse necessarily. I think we just want to get those conflicts out in the open, just so it's cleared in our record keeping and to members of the public where people are coming from. So,
Great.
Caroline, I don't know if your question's for me. Go ahead.
Thank you, Becca and Barrett. Another question from Caroline.
Sorry, this is actually a quick step back into talking about the consultation sessions, but I just wanted to, I was reflecting on where you were sharing, Peter, about the sessions not being recorded, so that if people are asking questions, it's not identifiable who's asking which questions. And I guess I'm just wondering if, at least for the ones that I've attended, I feel like the system has been for people to send questions in writing, and then the staff reads the questions out. But the answers to the questions, by not recording them, those answers to those questions aren't available if you weren't at the session. And so I guess I just wanted to, I'm wondering if actually that concern has been addressed through the system that the sessions are happening in, and knowing that there's so many entities impacted in this, and that I don't know, I think the more transparency we can have, the better people feel about the program. And so not expecting an answer right now, but just sharing a curiosity of wondering if that's already been addressed in ways other than not recording the session. Or if there's some additional way that could be even further protected, or that certain ones could be, but I feel like a lot of people would probably really appreciate recordings.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback, Carolyn. We can look at we can go back and revisit it with the team. I think that was the initial thinking that was put forward. I as I mentioned with the FAQs, we will be as well putting together feedback as well on questions that we're getting, and looking at developing more FAQs as well, so that they will be posted. And I think 99% of people would prefer to read something that didn't include all my ums and ahs and mumbling as part of it. So we can likely provide clearer answers through an approach like that as well. I think that one other thing that I might mention as well is this is a pretty dynamic period of time. So we are presenting regularly to this group. We are presenting regularly as part of those consultation sessions, and we will be updating our approach based on the feedback that we're receiving. So there will be lots of time for people to get feedback as part of the process. There will be lots of touch points in order for people to understand what's happening.
Thank you,
Caroline. Are there any other questions? Okay. So I think we're ready. Need to move on to the cost formula for reimbursement for collections here.
And I'm going to hand this over to Yuri to talk it through.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, Yuri Freeman, CAA. And I am going to do this next section on cost reimbursement. I do want to build a little bit on what Peter and Carolyn were just talking about, and responses and drafts and iterations. This is, it's dynamic and fluid right now. So I'm going to be sharing our draft thinking to date. We're going to be sharing this version of this in the consultation on Tuesday. I've been holding off on doing the slide deck for Tuesday until post this meeting, because I expect we're going to get some input today that could change how we share it on Tuesday. We're going to get input on Tuesday that will change how I share in future iterations. So it is constantly evolving and changing, and as we get ready for this program plan submission to you all in CDPHE. Before we get into our current thinking on the reimbursements, I wanted to take one step back and just talk about the statutory requirements. Darla, I assume I'll do this unless you want to, but this is straight from the, all right, let's see you shaking your head as a negative, straight from the state statute, just to center folks on what we're talking about. So the first one, so in our project plan, we have to include cost formulas for reimbursement to service providers. Within that, we would do cover direct, indirect costs of implementing program, including the cost of providing recycling services through contracts with service providers or reimbursements for those recycling service costs. The program plan must include reimbursement rates for 100% of the net recycling service costs. I'm going to use that term a ton today, the 100% of net recycling service costs, because that's something that is key to keeping us from getting sideways with the statute. No, we really do have to reimburse for the full, the 100% net service costs. We will be including an objective cost formula. I'll talk about that today. And some of the factors that should be included in that cost formula are listed here below, such as going into regional recycling service costs, density, types and number of households, methods, revenues, contamination, other factors. Next slide, please, Scott. A couple more items, and once again, this is straight from the statute, 22-1355. We shall include reimbursement rates for service providers that elect to participate in the program and elect to be reimbursed by the pro. We'll describe the process for updating this occasionally or periodically as necessary, because obviously service costs are not static and they're constantly changing. We shall contract with service providers to provide covered entities with convenient and equitable access for recycling services for all readily recyclable materials at no charge to the covered entity. Another important qualifier here, no charge to the covered entity. A couple other items, I'll talk about these more in like 2 slides. Under the EPR program, a local government is not required to provide recycling services. So we aren't coming in, and CDPHE wouldn't be coming in and saying, City of Lyman, you have to provide recycling services. That's not part of the EPM plan. If a city does elect to provide those recycling services, we would reimburse them. And then the reimbursements must be used for the local government's recycling program. Makes sense. Next slide. And I'm going to go through a couple of these scene setting slides and then pause for questions before we really get into our approach in more detail. When we're talking about reimbursement, it is that full recycling supply chain from collectors, transfer, and processors. So that will be covered. We're not reimbursing the end market users directly. They could tangentially be reimbursed because they're working through the system for payments, but we're not giving reimbursements directly to end markets, but we will be giving them to collectors and processors and potentially transfer as well. Next slide, please. Today, oh, actually, I'm sorry, Scott, can you go back? I'm sorry, man. So today I'm really talking about that first block on the left, the collectors. This is a complex issue. We've done quite a bit of thinking on it. Our approach is semi-baked. It's definitely not 100% done. So as I get into it, we'll be asking you questions and we're looking for your input and help. And really today I'm talking about the collection side. The transfer and processor is an equally important part of the reimbursement, and though it's all tied together. Because there's so much content to share, I'm going to do that at a future meeting. In terms of the consultations, the 20th, which is next Tuesday, we're doing the collectors, so mirror kind of what you're hearing today. And then the 27th, we're going to be talking more about the processors and transfer. So this really is the collectors. Next slide, please, Scott. When I talk about collections, covered entities within the legislation includes residential and non-residential. The residential is faster, so single family or multifamily residents beginning. Well,
Yuri,
yes.
sorry to jump in here, and you're not the only one. I've just got a message from our translators here through Brandon that speakers are speaking too quickly for the translators right now, and And this gives me an opportunity to thank Megan for being on the ball here with the slides. So she, Megan at PSI, I think, right, Megan? Or is that Brandon that's doing the slides? Brandon. Thank you, Brandon, for doing the slides. Okay, it's a whole team effort here. So if you can slow down a little bit, our translators would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Will do my best, Scott. It's one of my many faults is I'm a fast talker. So I will do my best, man, to slow it down a bit. And yeah, remind me to give me a virtual nudge if I continue to speak quickly.
Okay.
So for today's presentation, I'm really going to be talking about the residential covered entities. So 6 months after the program plan, as we move toward implementation, we will be doing single family and multifamily, which is important. The non-residential locations, including public places, small businesses, and schools, we will address in the program plan how a process and timeline to expand to non-residential beginning no later than 2028. However, once again, it's such a large topic. I'm going to keep it semi-focused on this residential covered entities, single family, multifamily for today. Next slide, please, Megan. All right. I think this might be my final scene setting slide, but I do want to talk a bit about baseline, because not only do we have HB 12 or HB 22-1355 guiding our process here, we also have the Colorado State Statute 3015-401, which grants powers and authorities to counties and towns. We're home rule state, so counties and home rule communities or towns in the state, what they can and cannot do in terms of regulating recycling. The reason I want to share this is we get into it. Open market, as you all know, is a big part of our state, and there are some limitations in what we can really do to address open market. So I want to set some of those out early. So under 3015-401, if you haven't read it, in the past 20 years, I've probably read this thing like 100 times. It's long. It talks about items not related to solid waste as well, but it is worth reviewing because it really does lay out the authorities that or the powers that communities have. So local governments can regulate and license haulers. They can, they can provide services. So like City of Denver provides their own services. They can conduct public procurement. So like Fort Collins, you can go out to bid and get a contracted service provider. You can require use or the imposition of a fee for residential waste services up to and including 7 units. So city can license haulers, they could contract, or they can provide those services up to and including 7 units. Effectively, that makes all multifamily and commercial 100% open market in the state of Colorado. The city cannot, compel fees or require services for multifamily 8 and above or commercial. So they cannot compel payments. And another interesting fact in here is a city or town or county cannot prohibit providing waste services by a private person within the limits of any county or other local subdivision if that person is in compliance with the applicable rules and regulations. So what this means is that even if a city can't stop a service provider from entering into a market, as long as they're meeting those minimum requirements to be in that market. And we also saw on the last slide, it's under here on 22-1355, a local government is not required to provide recycling services under EPR, and private service providers, so a private hauler, is not required to provide recycling services under the EPR program. So collectively, this means that under this landscape, we've put together a process that will make services available, accessible under open market, contractual markets, municipal collections. We will begin implementation within 6 months of final approval, but it may take time in some of these open market situations for every household to be with a hauler that provides those services. Next slide. I think this is my question slide. Oh, one more, and I'll get to questions. So the reason I want to bring all this up, contracting, licensing, municipal collections, and open market. The majority of our state is open market. So the majority, this is based on population. 56% of the state population lives in the open market. Under the open market, anyone can, like I'm in an open market subscription service, I can call a hauler whichever hauler I choose, and I can contract with the hauler directly for services. Local government, City of Denver provides services with their trucks and their staff. And then contracted collection, this will be like Lafayette or Louisville or Golden, wherein the city contracts with the service provider to provide services to that city. Next slide, please. Within this, so our approach is to make sure we are in accordance with the statutory requirements and the funding principles. And a big part of it is we have to reimburse 100% of the net recycling service cost of the recycling services provided by service providers under the program. So basically, we have to cover 100% net costs, whether or not it's open market, contracted, or municipal. And so when I start to talk about the approach, we're going to hit on all three one at a time, do some pauses to answer questions, and try to surface some of the challenges that you all see and some additional ways we can improve it. So next one, please, Megan. Sorry, the font's slightly small in this, I'm realizing as I read it, but I do want to talk about a generalized approach for all of this. So one tenet I'm keeping in mind as we move forward our approach is open, fair, and competitive, or open, competitive, and fair. Actually, those words come straight from the Colorado State statute as well, is that we have to have an open, competitive, and fair process. And under this, we are proposing an approach and want to continue to build on approach that provides an equitable and transparent opportunity for service providers to participate in the EPR program. So we know that local haulers, small haulers are a big part of our services and our system here in Colorado. So we are proposing an approach to make sure that all of them can compete in this fairly and equitably, because we want all service providers to be able to participate. Next up, we want to support existing services and infrastructure. We don't want to rebuild it. We want to leverage all of the existing infrastructure and services that can meet our regulatory requirements, subject to successful negotiations. We want to improve access to collection and operate cost effectively. Throughout the system, we are looking at driving efficiency and effectiveness. We want to make this the most cost-effective and efficient system we can. So this tenet will be used both to improve the performance of the existing recycling programs and to add new materials in a cost-effective manner. Accuracy and transparency is key for us. This isn't just in the entire program, but particular for this reimbursement process. Reimbursement payments must be based on accurate and transparent costs. We can't have a service provider requesting a reimbursement for $50 a household a month when our actual costs are only $10 a household a month. So you have to have some accuracy and transparency in this reimbursement process. No duplication of funding. If you recall, a couple slides back, one of the parts of HB of the state statute was that there's no cost to households or to generators. So if we're reimbursing a hauler, we have to make sure, or service provider, we have to also make sure that they aren't also charging the resident for that service that they're being reimbursed for and we're paying for it twice, or the household is paying for it and the pro is paying for it and the service provider is benefiting from double payments. And of course, we want to be consistent with HB 22-1355 objectives. Next one, please, Megan. All right, I will pause here for a moment. Do questions, you don't have to answer these questions. Ask Peter and I any questions you want on the general approach and some of the guiding principles we're looking at or requirements on the state statute and the baseline setting for the state. Then I'm going to get into the details of our approach for reimbursements for collection.
Okay, so Yuri, you're looking, but are you looking for questions from what you just covered first, and then you'll go question by question through here? How would you like to do it?
Defer to you, man. You tell me what you want to do.
So,
I'm open to either one, and it's I guess I'm agnostic.
All right, so you can read the questions here. If there's some that generate a question or a comment from you, you can certainly jump in. But also, do you have any questions from what Yuri just presented? And we can always go back. Brandon can go back to the slides if it's a different slide number. Liz.
Liz Chapman, Recycle Colorado. Thank you so much, Yuri, for putting all that together and your team. the question you have here is related to a question I had, which is the statute states that the reimbursement will not, do I understand correctly that what you just told us is the statute prohibits double payment? So if the hauler is reimbursed by the CAA, they are prohibited legally from charging their customer for that same cost. They can't get paid twice for the same service. Okay, so then the question is, related to that, it sounds like CAA will be monitoring for that. My question is, if you were to find someone that is in violation and is double charging, who enforces that and what is the consequence for doing it incorrectly?
Thanks, Liz.
Pete, you can go, or I can answer either way, and I don't know if the CDPHE folks want to weigh in on it as well. I could. Pete, why don't you take first, and if you don't say what I'm going to say, I'll say something else.
Yeah. So, Liz, I think we would have agreements in place with those that are receiving reimbursement. Those entities would need to meet the requirements that we are setting out for them. And so that would mean that they would need to deal with ensuring that residents were not getting charged for the services being received. Now, this can play out in a number of different types of ways, as you know. You could have a situation where a service provider is providing subscription service to a household, and that may be bundled service. So they would need to, as of time of implementation, they would need to remove those recycling costs from that household. So they could not charge for it. They could charge for, I assume, the waste portion of the service if it's a bundled service, but they could not charge for the recycling service. You may have another circumstance where, let's say a local government is operating a drop-off site and they charge residents to go into that drop-off site. We would need to find a way to ensure that they were only charging for other materials that were being dropped off, not for the covered materials under the Act. So we will need to come to an arrangement, and I see largely that would be dealt with through the contractual relationship between those entities and CAA itself. So this is not something I don't think we would be looking for CDPHE. This would be a contractual agreement, and there would be potential consequences if they were double charging as part of that agreement. Yuri, did you want to add to that?
Well,
Liz Chapman again, could I ask for a little bit of clarification? And forgive me for being pedantic, but I want to be sure I understood the answer. So what I'm understanding you to say is it's not really an enforcement mechanism the way that most of us in government think of an enforcement mechanism. What I'm hearing you say is the mechanism to ensure compliance will be, in order to be reimbursed, you sign a contract, and one of the elements of that contract will be you cannot double bill for this service. If we're paying you, if we're reimbursing you, you cannot then charge someone. And if that entity is found to be violating that contract agreement, there will be terms written into the contract of the consequences for that violation. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what I think we're proposing as the approach that we would take to address that specific issue. So there may be other contractual arrangements that would need to be in place as well, Liz, with those providers that would deal with additional types of requirements that we have in as well. So, there are health and safety requirements that we have as part of the Act. There are track and trace types of requirements. So if the materials are going to a non-registered facility that or a facility that isn't sending materials to an appropriate market, that potentially would be a concern as well. And it
Okay.
looks like I've gotten myself into trouble with Rebecca. So
She's gonna keep you out of trouble.
That's
Go
not
ahead,
always the
Becca.
case when I raise my hand, Pete. Becca with the Colorado Attorney General's office. I was just raising my hand to comment that the department would agree with Pete that we would leave it up to CIA to address this in the first instance, but the department does have the authority to enforce any part of the act, including essentially the provision that says that person can't charge a point of sale or point of collection fee to consumers to recoup its costs in meeting the obligations of the act. So we would be there as a backstop if necessary.
Thank you, Becca. All right, back to the questions. Opening it up, it could be a question related to any of the 4 that are up on the screen, or it could be anything that was presented by Yuri or Pete beforehand. Barrett. And Barrett, if you could try to speak slowly. I got a mention from the interpreters that maybe with the background noise, it was a little bit hard. So if you could speak slowly and right into the mic as much as possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. So Barrett Jensen, landfill with recycling with waste connections. I do want to disclose that I work for a service provider, but I think we kind of covered that earlier. So my question with the statute is, when we're talking about net recycling costs, is that in the lens of bundled? Like, because we know a lot of bundled, right? Or is it the net cost compared to the gross cost of what it is to recycle? Because there might be a gap there, right? And so how would service providers address that? Is it, hey, here's the normal cost. This is how much the recycling is, 100% of that cost. I hope that makes sense.
So hopefully that was heard. Net cost bundling or separate. It's related to that. I didn't hear every single word here, but Pete, would you or Yuri want to respond to that?
So I'm going to talk it through just because I'm trying to process the question. So I think, as I understand it, you're asking for, if it's bundled service, would it be the cost isolated or as part of that bundled cost? I think that's what Barrett is asking, and I think we are looking to provide compensation based on what the cost is for that service provider. And I think Yuri will deal with it in the next couple of slides, where he talks about potentially options we might have to provide compensation based on costs, whether you're collecting it bundled or whether you're collecting it just separately. I will note, just as Barrett's on the line, because it does strike me in my head to say it, that it is important as well that we're thinking through ahead of time, because we have 6 months to implement after the program plan is approved. That obviously we'll need the waste management companies to think about some of these things ahead of time, because their billing structures will need to change in the open market side if they are going to be receiving funding through us.
So Barrett, do you have any follow-up there? Or you can certainly write something in the chat if that might be best for you.
I'll probably do that moving forward.
Okay,
But
because
thanks,
there's
Pete. I'm
background noise. There's background noise too, and it amplifies in the earbuds as
Yeah.
well, unfortunately.
My apologies, but don't worry, Pete. I'm still digesting my question too.
All right, thank you. Rick, you have a question or comment?
Yes, Rick Cater, Murph's Swordfish Consulting. So my my comment, and it's followed by a question, is that I'm assuming that the Murph or the processor and the hauler will get paid on a stream basis. So he's being paid, they are being paid to collect residential single stream, for instance. There will be a processing fee tied to that particular stream that a Murph then will process, and that a collection group will pick up. my question is, when you brought up the bundled, currently, because there isn't a real dense multifamily home network, there is commingled collection of streams. So you'll get residential multifamily home material commingled with non-program material that is commercial, so they can densify their routes. My question to you in the future would be, wow, how are we gonna, they come in with a mixed load. How am I going to get paid, and how is the collector gonna get paid as a percent of volume, by weight? How do you differentiate those commingled streams? Thank you very much.
Great, Yuri Freeman, CAA. Rick, excellent question. We have it embedded in here when we start to talk about multifamily. We got a couple ideas that we can float today. I don't know if they're good ideas. It is a challenge. You know it, Barrett. Anyone that does collections, Barrett, you know it. Because absolutely the multifamily, if the front end loaders are running combined routes and isolating the recycle data, recycle tons on the combined route, on hauling as well as processing is going to be some of the details that we're going to have to work our way through. But yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a wonderful answer for it yet, but we do have some ideas that I'm happy to share with you. And more input's great, man. Appreciate it. Again.
Thank you for the question and comment. So Yuri, does it make sense if some of the things you're going to be getting to relate to the questions that are being asked if you move forward with some other things? And
I think that would be great, unless there's another question here. But yeah, some of the we're starting to get into some of the details that maybe future slides will answer. So,
okay.
Let me know.
As you started talking, Clinton has another comment or question. That it seems like his hand didn't go down when I asked my question, so I guess he wants to ask it. Go ahead, Clinton.
Well, I was just going to reiterate what Rick is pointing out with commingled streams. Is this? I know that the the legislation doesn't cover collection for the compostables, but if it's a commercial or residential stream that's commingled to optimize transportation and hauling services, how do we differentiate compostables in residential versus the commercial streams? Like, how are we going to quantify that if you're looking for accuracy to be able to charge? But that maybe you're going to answer that in the future. I just bringing up it's the same challenge within the organic stream.
Yeah, I mean, Clinton, it's a challenge. I think we've talked about it before. It's definitely a challenge. I would say if we look at other jurisdictions, British Columbia requires only for multifamily, they require it to be a residential route. So they don't allow for commercial collection on that route. So that is one example. I will say, the result has been that there hasn't been large pickup of multifamily residential buildings. So we know that there's a potential challenge with that because routes are developed for waste management companies based on those routes. For us, there's a concern in a couple of ways. A, how do we know how much of the material in that truck is the pros or the producer's responsibility under the Act? Second, we need to understand as well the material that's dropped off that needs to be processed. How much of it can the producers say is collected residential materials, and how much of it is not? And again, on the processing side, there is that allocation of cost side. So it is a challenge I think we're working through internally as to how to address that factor. Certainly, we would appreciate feedback as we go forward on that side. But it is definitely a complication for implementation moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to suggest then, Yuri, that you go through the next set of slides. We can pause if there's certain places here that it makes sense to pause and see if there's any questions. But there seems to be quite a few here before we get to the producer dues as well. And then we have to get through those just a couple of slides before the break. So thank you.
Scott, can you remind me what time the break is? Just so I can be watching the clock too.
Well, we're flexible, but from 1:50 to 2 o'clock.
That helps.
Rick, something you want to say now? Okay.
Please, Rick Hader, Swordfish Consulting, Murphs. Knowing that we're going into the meat of this next section, I wanted to make a comment because you don't mention margin very much in the next, you only mention it once. And I wanted everybody to understand that net cost includes a margin. And when you go through these next options, it's going to be interesting to hear how you handle that margin relationship. So thank you very much, guys.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Yuri? Next slide, Brandon.
Brandon, sorry, but maybe I'm saying the wrong name. So I've got 4 slides where I'm going to talk about, which is maybe slightly easier. I think it's slightly easier, but y'all can tell me. And that's the approach for contracted collection and municipally provided services. Pause for a moment and get a couple Q&As on that, and then jump into the open market, which in my opinion is the harder not to unravel here. So starting with local government, this is I keep using city and county of Denver because that's where I've worked, but municipally provided. So it's the city's staff and trucks. They're doing the collections. They're doing it. This is the minority of our system here in Colorado, the least common type of system here in the state. We're looking at this as 2 different ways. One is a local government that has actual cost data. So to reimburse, we need to know how much the recycling system costs, how much the recycling service costs. Some cities I know in Colorado put this in the general fund, or maybe some of it's in property taxes, but it's not a user fee. That'd be that group 2. If there's a user fee, the city knows how much it costs to provide recycling services. They be in that group 1. They can isolate their recycling service costs. They would have to report data to CAA and say, here's our costs. We would ask for some type of review of that data. So they aren't just saying it costs us $100 a household a month and we just guessed. We actually need it to be like reviewed, third-party reviewed data. We'd also be requesting additional data. Under both of these, 1 and 2, the city would be reimbursed with 100% net service costs, and what shows in the further slide with an administrative cost too, realizing that there is some administrative cost for city to get this data and report it out. So 1, they can actually report the data. If there's a city today that provides collections, but they're like, gosh, it's in general fund or property taxes, and we don't know how much it costs per household. We can't give you that number. We would work with them to do a modeled cost that would say, okay, how many households you're doing, your trucks, let's come up with the best cost based on the model. And that would be, and then we negotiate with them, and that would be the basis for the reimbursement. So if it's say they can't report those costs, we still want to reimburse them for those services. We have to find another pathway to do it. As that city progresses and they improve their data collection, we'd hope to move them to scenario 1, where they're reporting more accurate and actual costs. The reason number 2 shows up there, and really this is based on my own experience. When I first started working at City and County of Denver, it was general fund, the majority of the services, and what portion of it was through property taxes. We had a good idea, but not an exact idea of how much recycling services cost per household in Denver. Since I've left there, they've done amazing work. They can isolate the costs now because they're actually charging user fees, so they know what the costs are under their new pay-as-you-throw scheme. But when I was there 10 years ago, they didn't know this accurate cost. So we want to find a pathway for both. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the contracted scenarios and then talk about some of the cost data and then additional data we put in these service agreements. Contracted is a little more complex, but not as hard, I don't think, as open market yet. So under a contracted scenario, this is like golden contracts with the service provider to do the service for them on behalf of the city. So there's 2 kind of scenarios under this that I guess four, but two main ones that we're seeing. One is if the local government bills. So the city is contracting with the hauler, the city is invoicing, the city is collecting money, they're getting data from the hauler. Under this scenario, the city's got all the data, they're handling all the money. We'd work directly with the city or the town or the municipality to reimburse them for the 100% net service cost. It's not simple, but once they simply tell us what their contractual costs are. So they say, in our contract, we're paying service provider A $10 a household a month. Here's a copy of the invoice. We're going to reimburse that city $10 a household a month for that service. There's a few other communities in Colorado in which the city's not really they've contracted with a hauler, but they aren't doing the invoicing or billing, and they aren't actually touching the money. So under this scenario, we think it will be easier to go directly through the hauler. So instead of the hauler collecting money, giving it to the city telling us reimbursing the city reimbursing the hauler, we would have the hauler in this arrangement tell the same information to CAA that we're servicing community A. The contracted costs are $10 a household a month, or 15 or 8, or whatever they are, and then we'd have to reimburse them for that cost. This cost will be inclusive of like the carts and the service and the everything that goes into it. It's not just, picking up. I know it's a lot more than just a pickup. 3 and 4 are kind of these transition ones. So if there's a city today that's or not today, in 2026, or their contract expires in June of 27. In 2026, we'd hopefully be able to give that community some guidance on here's some RFP language, some contractual form language that you could use as a city to make it easier to do that reimbursement with CAA in the future. So we develop some materials, make it easier for the city. And then likewise, number 4 is if there's a city that is not organized collection today, but they want to go this route in the future, we'd have those materials available to make it easier when they do have that contract to work with CAA for that reimbursement. So all of these are variations of the same theme. The city's contracting, municipalities contracting with the service provider. They know their costs that they're being charged per household per month. We're going to reimburse that cost, 100% net cost. Next slide, please. And I got one more after that, 2 more, I guess. Now pause. So cost data is a big part of the reimbursement. Covered provision of recycling services to covered entities only. That seems pretty obvious to me. For the actual cost of reimbursement, so this is the city that knows their data. It would have to be initially audited or reviewed. I don't think we're looking at audit or review every month or every, biannually, but when they're entering into these service agreements, we'd want some verification that they're telling us the real costs. And they do have to isolate it, because I know within solid waste departments, you're doing things like dead animal control, graffiti control, doing services that aren't covered under CAA. So they have to pull those costs out of their service costs so we can reimburse them only for recycling. The model cost for cities that are in this situation right now, they don't have the data. Significantly less cost data than submissions, but it would take more modeling work, and we'd have to negotiate with that city to make sure we're covering as much as we can to get to that 100% net service costs. What else on here? Total and per unit basis. What I mean there, because Peter asked me about that both yesterday or day before. What I'm thinking we'd ask for is tell us for if it's a quarterly reimbursement, and have a question in a few slides how frequently we should do these. If it's quarterly data reporting and reimbursement, say it was $150,000 this quarter for services, and per household it was $10 a household. So per unit, and unit is customer or household. Over time, we'd be looking at ways to increase efficiency. At the outset, we're reimbursing 100% net cost. That's what we have to do by the statute. If we start to see outliers that community A is, their actual costs are $50 a household a month, we might want to work with that community, say, how can we reduce these costs? Because every other community in the state is only at X dollars and are 50% cheaper than you. So be looking at ways to increase efficiency with the system. And this will be through investment, incentives, or promotion of best practices. Next slide, please. So we would envision, and I do have a slide at the end of this talking about some of the provisions that could be in the service agreement. but we would envision entering into service agreements with these entities for the reimbursement. So we would want some additional data as well. Some of this is required under statute, some of it is just important data. How many covered residential entities did you service, frequency of collection, we need tonnage data, volume or weight, material destinations, make sure it's going to registered facilities, participation, missed collections. I think a hard one on here, and this is one of my questions on the next slide, is inbound contamination is mentioned in the statute or listed in the statute. So I think I have some questions about how we're going to be measuring inbound contamination, because I think this is, that's not going to be an easy one. If it's a contracted community, we probably want things like a copy of the contract. It's public already, but we'd ask for a copy. And we probably want copies of invoices to residents to get to your question, Liz, like make sure they aren't double billing. Give us a copy of your invoice, and we'd like to see some random invoices. Make sure you aren't billing twice. On the reimbursement, we would reimburse directly to either the local government or the contracted service provider on a regular basis. I put regular basis here on purpose because I do want to solicit some input from you all and the general consultation what a regular basis should be. There's some benefits of monthly, but there's some drawbacks too, because it's more reporting, more data. Maybe quarterly is better. Maybe some entities want to be on annual. It could be variable too. It could be individual agreements. So some of that is input I'd seek from you all. Reimbursements based on either reported actual costs or the modeled, they don't have reported, and it will cover the administrative costs for the local governments. My assumption here is that the private contractors, they bake that administrative cost into their fees already. So there's not an additional admin cost for the contractors because it's right in the fees they're charging, but that is something I'd like some feedback on as well. Next slide, please, Brandon or Megan, whoever's in charge. I'll pause there, Scott, and we got 20 minutes or maybe less, so see how fast you want me to go.
Okay, so yes, Brandon is doing the slides and Megan and I are getting the questions down here. And now let's take a pause here. Any of the questions that are up on the slides, you can see them, or any questions or comments you might have from what Yuri had just gone through, the next set of slides. We'll go with Rick first and then Jake.
Rick Cater, Murph's Swordfish Consulting. On the reimbursement slide that you had earlier, you asked the question, how often would the reimbursement or payment schedule be? I'm assuming you're talking about the data transmission, not you're going to pay the MRF or the hauler 60, 90 days out. You're going to pay them on a 15 to 30 day kind of run, because you won't get any little haulers if you.
Yes, sir. Rick, you're correct. I was not talking about like the terms for the payment, but like if like how often do hauler, and I'm simply talking about collections right now, and MRFs will get to the future day because it might be a different schedule, Rick, depending on how it works for MRFs. How often do they want to submit? Because we would require submitted data before we can do the reimbursement payment. And so how often do service providers want to get that payment? You know, cash flow could be an issue for smaller service providers. Maybe they want to be on that monthly, but then I understand it adds an onus of reporting to them. So what is, you know, our ideas right now are quarterly or monthly. I don't think it's annual, but I'm, you know, want input from y'all and from the haulers too, because we'll be sharing this with other groups as well.
So it's frequency of invoicing so that you can reimburse them. That's the question.
Got it. And Peter, anything, am I misstating anything or using? Right.
Okay.
But that all ties back to cash flow, and that's huge for a hauler, a small hauler in particular. So.
And Rick, do you have a recommendation?
Well, if I were doing it, I'd be doing net 15 because I want my cash as soon as possible, right? But net 30 probably is doable for most folks.
But Rick, are you reporting monthly for it's not the question of when the payment's going to be made. It's the question of how often are you reporting to get paid?
Okay, so you're not connecting, I thought I heard earlier that you're connecting me getting paid to me submitting reporting data.
Well, we're gonna need data to be able to pay out what's getting reported in.
On
Correct.
the, you know, service providers, if they're, if they've got 10, if they're servicing 1,000 households in January, then in February, they're only servicing 900, and in March, they're servicing 1,200. We would need that data to know like how much to reimburse them. So we aren't just, yes, we do need that data to do the reimbursement.
No, I get that. And I think they're going to get very creative and they're going to get you the data as quickly as they can get you the data, as long as they get cash as soon as they get you the data. So that's beautiful.
Okay,
Thank you, Rick.
thank you, Rick. All
Sorry.
right, Jake, and then Liz.
Jake Neese, Erie County, just on the side of local governments with contracted services. Local governments have a really heavy reporting burden with all kinds of state programs already. And so I would certainly advocate for yearly, because a lot of those contracts are at least a year, if not multi-year contracts that local governments have with haulers. And so doing monthly would be a real pain. Quarterly could be acceptable, but considering the length of those contracts, just having a yearly reporting, yearly reimbursement for local governments, I think would make the most sense.
And Jake, let me just follow up and ask the question, because I just want to be abundantly clear. So municipal governments, even small municipal governments, would be okay not receiving funding until the end of the year? Because if they're not reporting in, it would mean they wouldn't get paid until the end of the year.
I can't speak for all governments. However, I would say that the existing billing that I'm familiar with goes out to individuals, and so we would have to figure out if we were going to reimburse people or just not charge them in the first place. But I think that because, and again, coming from a local government perspective, we just look at that annual budgeting. It would be easy enough to budget that money and budget that reimbursement on an annual basis.
Okay, so Jake, you're going the other end, that from a local government perspective, it might be annually. Rick is bringing up the point that maybe it's going to be a lot quicker than that. So it might raise the question, Yuri and Pete, you commented perhaps there could be different reporting for different service providers.
Yeah,
My take is it's worth the consideration. I don't want to make that commitment because we have to develop a system to work throughout the state. And yeah, so I think it's worth in my opinion, it's worth the discussion to see if there's a way we could operationalize that.
Okay, so let's
I
hear
don't know
from.
if we can. It's something I want to dig into.
All right, so let's hear from some others here in terms of frequency of reporting in order to get paid. Liz, and then Caroline.
Liz Chapman, the nonprofit Recycle Colorado. Thank you so much. And in keeping with the topic at hand, I know that one of the big burdens for smaller operators is data tracking and collection. So one of my questions to CAA is it possible, is it in your plans to set up an online standard reporting system that would help streamline that process?
Very good.
Because I think what needs to happen here is a tool needs to be developed that is more than a form to fill out. I think if there could be some automation of the reporting, that would immensely change the dynamic and change the ability, especially of the smaller operators and the smaller towns that don't have the staffing and the resources to whatever the frequency of reporting is. I think that if there's some automation built in to the system, for example, I know there are systems available where when the truck goes across the scale, whether that's a MRF scale or landfill scale, that data can be scanned with a code and a number and fed into a system. And the systems that I'm aware of are different than what we're talking about here, but it strikes me that there might be a technological solution to this dilemma that would allow the data to be reported in real time to make it much easier to submit monthly or quarterly reports. And I think making that data collection easy and automated is the key to making sure that it is not a burden on the small governments and it is feasible for the small operators. And in terms of the question about yearly versus quarterly versus monthly, a question I have back to you is it possible to set up a system that you could choose what works best for you? Or is that just going to make things way too complicated on CAA's end? And then my last question related is, you keep mentioning a third-party certifier for the collection of this data, for the invoicing. Is there any sense of how you would select this third party? So when you say third party, I am hearing not the state and not CAA.
I can,
Thanks, Liz.
Pete, unless you want to go, I can take them.
Okay, yeah.
I'll go backwards. Liz. Number 3, the third party. If we were to hire a third party, it'll be through an open procurement. I don't know how we're going to do it yet, but I'm thinking about I guess we're discussing the potential for a third party to help collect this data to to keep some of the data where it needs to be, especially when we get to open market. I'll show in like 2 slides to keep some of that data proprietary if needs to, if we're talking about some of the market pricing. I'm not sure we're going to do it, but that's definitely one of the things we're considering in our approach. If we were to go that route, it would be through an open procurement. For the variability, question number 2, could a entity choose? It's something that we have to figure out. I don't know. Ideally, right? We'd say you choose weekly, monthly, biannually, annually, but operationally, that might be an impossible thing for us to operationalize. So we're going to continue to see how we can do it, see if there's general consensus among the community, haulers, service providers. If most of them are like, hey, quarterly works, maybe there's not need to go annual or monthly. But if we're hearing from small service providers, like we need it to be monthly, we can't manage the cash flow, we'd have to look in the way to do that. Because we definitely want to, going back to those general approaches and principles, we want to be fair, equitable, and competitive. So we don't want to set up a system where small haulers can't compete. And then the first question, I didn't write it down. Oh, the data collection.
Automation.
Yes, I'm sorry. I did write down. We're bringing our chief information officer along on these conversations that we're having internally on the reimbursements, because the data collection and reporting is going to be a huge part of this. So looking at ways to automate and make it easy, not just on reporting side, but on verification side on the back end too, because we're going to have to quickly get these invoices in and do those reimbursement payments. So we are looking at ways we can automate the best we can. I don't know if we're looking at things in the field right now. We're looking more on like a portal for reporting to make it as easy and automated as possible. That is going to be an ongoing question when I'm meeting with haulers of like, what can you report out? I don't want to ask for data on the reimbursement that a hauler's like, there's no way we could possibly report that out. It's impossible data. So we have to make sure it works for the hauler, for service providers as well. And Peter, anything else? I interrupted you slightly. Anything you want to add to that, man?
I think the only other thing is, we also need to keep in mind, so we're going to look at all of these types of functions, Liz. But I mean, keep in mind that we also have to figure out as well, what is the plan that's going to be approved and what changes are we going to make for our system? And then we have 6 months to implement. So There is the build side of this, which adds some uncertainty for us around, we could start building things today, but we don't know whether they're going to be the approved program plan. And some of that might deal with detail and information we're asking for. And so that does create some questions for us in how quickly things can be built and be ready for implementation.
Good point, Pete.
Okay, thank you. So we have Caroline and then Jake, and then I think I'm going to ask Yuri to go through the next slides to bring us up to the producer dues next afterwards. So let's prepare for that, Yuri. All right. Was it Caroline?
Yeah, I just took my hand
There you go.
down.
You took your hand down, and yeah, and that's the thing with Zoom. You moved on my screen. Okay, there you are.
Here. Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. On the timeline of the reporting and the reimbursement, in the contract in Fort Collins is moving into a single hauler residential contract starting September 30th. And in that, it is the system where the residents are billed directly by the contractor, but the contractor also reimburses the city for its administrative costs for that. So the city is receiving quarterly payments, just thinking of the frequency. The city is receiving quarterly payments for the administrative fee that is charged as part of our contracted hauling to add to your data set. We also collect information from all the haulers that operate in the community, and we have for many years as part of the license requirement in Fort Collins, which is different than getting paid back for something, but just additional data points. We require that data twice a year. And at one point when we were reviewing our system, I had asked some of our haulers who report if it would make sense for us to shift to annually instead. And we got feedback that twice a year is actually more helpful because you can just kind of lose track of things if you're trying to look back over an entire year. But 6 months felt like a reasonable keep track of information and be able to submit it. Again, that's different than getting reimbursed in your cash flow, but just another data point. I agree that if your system can handle it, variability likely makes sense because there are probably, as you're talking about, different drivers for different entities. I think I'm also thinking about the overlay of data. So for instance, Fort Collins asks all the haulers in the community to report tonnage information to us. So where can we streamline systems to get, so haulers aren't having to report the same information to multiple entities using multiple systems and multiple forms. So I think my comments maybe sort of are similar to what Liz is saying. And so maybe I'm repeating what Liz is saying, maybe I'm adding slightly onto it, but I was thinking about, haulers' routes don't stop at city or county lines. So presumably they are going to be submitting information to you of all the customers they service, no matter where they are. But then also municipalities and counties want to know what's collected within their jurisdiction. So just sort of that, as we're designing data systems, how could we, if we are able to design some more efficiencies into the system, how can we account for both of those sets of needs? As I think, as Liz was saying, thinking about the data collection, both on the how do the small haulers collect data from their operations and how is it transmitted to CAA and or local governments, what information needs to go where, but sort of the two sides. I know for the real small haulers that have operated in our community, the systems, I think that the systems for how they collect the information that they send to us are really surprisingly manual sometimes in the past. And so I think supporting small haulers in efficient data collection, I think helps everybody. And then the question that I had is, I'm wondering if you can share some more context. One of the bullets that you have in here for data collection is participation and setouts. And I wonder if you can provide a little bit more information on what you mean by those and which entity you would anticipate submitting that information. And is that something those entities already have, or is this ideal information?
That is an excellent question, Carol. I don't know, I feel like I've said this a few times. I don't know the exact answer to the participation set out. The thought process behind it is that if we are reimbursing for payment, we want to be as assured that as we can that a household actually has a cart and they're setting out and they're participating. So I don't want to see a reimbursement where someone's charging us for 1,000 households, but in reality, only 200 households are setting out containers on a weekly basis. And if that is happening, if we can get that data, we say, gosh, we need to do an intervention for education outreach in this community. There's no one setting out, or we do the intervention with the service provider because they're billing us, but they didn't deliver carts and they aren't providing that service. So we do want to collect some data, not just on like household service, but something on participation as well. I don't know the quite mechanism to do it, but that is something I'll be digging into.
And is there, in this context, a distinction between participation and set outs?
No, I probably could just wrote set out or.
No, it's, I'm just trying to,
I think it's
no, there is a difference because we're talking about one is participation. So how many people on that route are putting their materials out? How many households are putting that material out? And then how much material is actually getting set out? Because we are trying to drive increased participation and increased amount of materials that are coming back through that system that are clean materials. And I think one of the things that I want to highlight, and I certainly understand all of the concerns related to making sure that the waste management sector can provide the data, but with the movement, the shift of where we're going, there is a shift in responsibility, and we need to make sure that this program is delivering efficiently and effectively. And to do that, we need data. We need to be able to make sure that we can properly account for what's getting picked up, whether there's improvements to the system that are happening. And so that is likely going to mean for many of these companies greater information that they are going to need to track and provide. And I think there is a question on that side as to how do we move the sector forward to make sure that they're collecting the types of information that we're going to need to have a robust and accountable system in place.
Okay, we have one more question here. Caroline, do you have another quick comment to make? You've added a lot of texture to what Liz had mentioned, so it's very appreciated.
Just a 2-second recommendation for sort of clarity and for folks, maybe participation can be translated as amount of material collected, which helps us understand participation, just to bring all the folks along and appreciate all the clarity and insight.
Thank you, Caroline. Jake?
So I'm sensing actually kind of a little bit of disconnect, or maybe it's just some confusion on my part or an assumption somewhere. But it feels like there's an assumption that local governments operate their own MRFs and landfills and everything. And that's not the case everywhere. Because the discussion I'm hearing is about how much volume is being processed, but from where I'm sitting, it's just a flat rate charged to each customer right now, and that amount of volume, someone could have a lot of volume or a little bit of volume, and they're charged the same amount. And so that's why I was saying that I thought it would be easier to report yearly, because we're just charging flat rates for residential pickup, and not we once the local government contracts with a waste hauler 1 year or a 3-year contract, charges a flat monthly rate to the residents, and then that's the end of it that we see. We're not seeing whatever's happening at the MRF. So it just feels like there's an assumption that every county operates like Boulder County, which I think is a great operation, but the smaller counties and municipalities, we don't run our own MRFs and waste transfer stations.
Jake, now I think you're understanding, I might not have done a good job explaining it. There is no assumption that communities that they're vertically integrated. And the vast majority of Colorado is not, right? It's Eagle County and Boulder County, the only ones that have MRFs. So under that situation where it's a flat, like and I'm not, I don't know your exact situation, had to like, especially an hour to talk to offline too. So if you have a contracted hauler, it's a flat fee. It's not a variable rate. You know, you're $10 a household a month for a year, and we're going to collect your recycling for that. The data we'd want is the $10 a household a month, what the fee is, but then we'd also be looking for some tonnage data because that hauler is still bringing materials to a facility, whether or not it's privately or publicly operated, and they're going to go over scale or get some weight ticket or volume ticket. So that hauler should be able to report that this is how many tons we collected from the 10,000 households we serviced, or 1,000. So we would be looking for that additional tonnage data as the program advances. I also want to point out that we're talking about transformational change in Colorado. It's going to take us time to get to the end state, and it's going to be some growth over time. So that is the end state, getting that data. But we still have to reimburse till we get there too. So we're happy to talk more about this too offline.
Jake,
Okay.
we'd also need information on, like, I'm assuming your community isn't stagnant, it's growing. There's potentially new homes being built and being serviced. So we would want information as to how many households, how that grows over time. So we're going to need that type of information to ensure that, again, there's some rigor within the system and that we're accurately reporting and knowing baseline what's happening year to year, because we're going to want to show progress towards our goals.
Okay. I know there's a lot more to discuss here. We're opening it up, and I think some of the side conversations will be necessary as well, as Yuri has offered. So thank you for that, Yuri. I would like to get us through to the producer fees if we could. Yuri, what are your thoughts here? Do you think you could speak slowly for the next couple of slides?
Speak medium slow, but maybe not go into as much detail than these last. And then I'm not sure what the future schedule is for these advisory board meetings, but we can maybe there's time in a future meeting to revisit some of this. This is obvious. The reimbursements are tricky. When we get into the processor side, it's going to be hard too. And it's I'm staying up all night working on this stuff already. And it's gonna take us a lot of time. So maybe I can introduce it, go through the open market, and push us along, Scott, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, so you have 6 slides and then discussion questions. So let's see if we can do that in 20 minutes or so, and then we'll take our break, 5-minute break for those that are needing that. Obviously step away at any time here.
That works. I can do the slides in under 10 minutes and then leave us some time for discussion.
Great. Clinton.
I just got to get a comment in, so I'm going to do it now. Clinton Sander, A1 Organics. Yuri, I'm looking at the question, what is the best way for CAA to work with service providers to collect data on contamination? Service provider is a hauler?
Or the discussion right now, yes, but not in general. Could be. It could also be MRF or transfer station when I start to get to the processor side too, or
Okay.
composter.
Okay. I'll leave my question for another time. Thanks.
Okay, Yuri, over to you. And Brandon, next slide, please.
Okay, open market, the big knot to untangle. So we've got some ideas here. I'm going to go through them fast and leave us time for questions, and we're available for more discussion as we move forward because we need a lot of discussion. So
right, just don't speak too fast.
56% of the state population is open market. We've got 2 ways we're approaching this. Now, and I'm going to ask you all to go back about 45 minutes when I was just talking about some of the regulatory landscape in the state. So EPR program, we can't tell a hauler they have to provide recycling service. Colorado state statute, you can't limit a service provider from operating in the jurisdiction as long as they're meeting the requirements of that jurisdiction. So within an open market, we can't go in and say, every hauler in this open market, you must now provide recycling service. We don't have the authority. A city perhaps could do it through a license, if a city chooses to, but CAA, neither CAA nor CDPHE can tell a city they have to do that. So that's up to a city. So there's some of these limitations, and then 100% reimbursement. So we're trying to balance all these things of like, we can't tell people what to do necessarily. We can't get in between a generator and a service provider. We don't want to break those contracts that exist. And we have to provide access, and it has to be 100% net reimbursement costs. Okay, so we've got two options here that would be available for haulers operating in open market subscription service areas. One is a market clearing price. Under this, we would calculate a reimbursement rate per household service. So in jurisdiction A, and I'll have a question for y'all what jurisdiction means. Is that a county? Is it a city? Is it a region? To be determined, but in area A, it's the average service cost calculated based on market data and modeled is $10 a household a month. Area B, it's 19. In area C, it's 6. It's a range because we know service costs are different. In the mountains, it's a lot more expensive. You drive down dirt roads far apart. Urban areas, it's pretty efficient, but you still could have opened one house out of every 10 you're stopping by. So you establish a market clearing price based on the cost formula informed by market data. They're going to vary by region. We'd say in region A, the market clearing price is $10 a household a month. Every hauler that wants to operate in this region or is operating in this region, if you want to participate, we will reimburse you $10 per household a month. And then you'd have to be part of the service agreement. Under the service agreement, they'd have to report some data to us, but they wouldn't have to report their detailed cost data because they're accepting that market clearing price. Say $10, that works for us. That's really close to what we charge. We accept that, we'll operate on that. If we're in that market clearing price jurisdiction and there's a hauler operating that says, you know what, it's actually $20 a household a month for me to service this area because it's up in the mountains. We have bear-proof containers. Households are a quarter mile apart from each other, a mile apart. $10 at that market clearing price does not work. They could submit an actual cost reimbursement request that says $10 is not enough. Our actual service costs are $20. They'd have to provide data to document it. Then we'd reimburse them for that actual service cost instead. So option A is the market clearing. Option B is in outlying cost areas or service areas is more expensive. There's an option B. The reason why we are putting option B in here as well is one of the ideas we had internally is if we offer a market clearing price of $10 a household a month and the haulers say it's $18, we aren't covering the 100% net service costs. So we had to find a way to not be sideways with the statutory requirements. So there's two options, market clearing and actual cost. Next slide, please. This is pretty dense. I'll skim it and share some highlights and y'all have these slides. You can read in more detail. If you're doing the market clearing price, the hauler chooses that option. They don't have to do the detailed cost data. So perhaps more haulers gravitate toward that if we can get an accurate market clearing price that's fair and covers those costs of service. For the actual cost submissions, we would be requiring more data to verify that the market clearing price really doesn't work and they actually do need more. Additional data reporting, kind of like what you're talking about, Jake, we would need additional data. You can't just say we're taking the $10 per household per month on open market. They'd also have to get that reimbursement, number of covered entity service, some tonnage data, participation, some of the information we just talked about. So there would be a data reporting element, even if they took the market clearing price. We'd reimburse directly to haulers on a regular basis. Use the word regular basis again, because I'm still not sure if it's monthly or quarterly. And it will be on a unit or per customer basis. We're talking, I'd like your input on this as we continue to move forward. Are there ways to build incentives to increase efficiencies? You know, we know under open market, you might have 10 different, maybe not 10, 8 different haulers servicing 10 households on the street on a single day, which isn't the most efficient system for collections. So are there ways through these agreements that we could look to drive efficiency? I'd like to work with the hauling community to see if there's ways we can drive this efficiency and make it more cost effective, reduce the wear and tear on streets, all the parts that come with increased efficiency. Next slide, please. So I talked a little bit about this market clearing price and the cost formula. There's a lot of elements that go into the cost formula. This is a selection of them. Some of these are laid out in the state statute, but things like population density, number, types of households served, collection method, margin. I know, Rick, you were talking about this earlier. The reimbursements will cover margin. That's part of the cost of doing service. We don't expect that private service operators are now turning into nonprofits and not making a margin. So margin is in there. Inbound contamination is called out in the legislation as something that goes into the cost factor formula. So that's why on the previous slide, I talked about how we look at this inbound contamination, which I think is a little tricky on how we're going to measure that. Next slide, please. Got 2 more. They're both pretty dense, but I'm going to do relatively fast, Scott, to try and keep us on time. So I've got HOAs and multifamilies too, because I talked about, when I'm talking about contracted open market and municipal, HOA is a little bit of an outlier, and so is multifamily. The bottom line for HOAs is the way we'd imagine working with HOAs is with the service provider, the hauler, not the HOA. We don't have great data on the number of HOAs. We don't have a lot of data on their procurement practices. I'm not positive that HOA procurement practices are as rigorous as public sector. So we don't know how they're contracting with haulers. Under this, we would work with the service providers to say, I'm servicing 10,000 households in, I don't know, some HOA in North Denver region. And that service provider would submit the reimbursement on their, they'd submit the reimbursement request to CAA. It's a contracted service to the HOA. So that service provider would say, here's what the cost is in that HOA. It's not the market clearing, it's the actual cost. What is the cost for the service? Next slide, please. Multifamily. This is a pretty tough nut to crack too. The very bottom line of this is additional discussion is needed to better understand this. I do think MFUs are going to be, they're going to be challenging. The approach for reimbursement is not to work with property managers or MFUs directly, but similar to HOAs, we'd be working with the service providers. And service providers would say, we're doing this service. Here's our actual, I don't think market clearing price would work, but I'd like input from the haulers. With multifamily, you all know it's size of container, frequency of collection, and variable based on how easy it is to get your truck in there and where it is. So there's a lot of different elements that go into provision of services for multifamily that make this cost a lot more variable than when you're looking at single family. So I don't, at this point, I'm not sure that the market clearing price would work. I'd be interested to hear from like you, Barrett, and other folks in the hauling industry of like, hey, maybe a cost per ton works, maybe a cost per cubic yard, maybe there is some type of market clearing price that does work in multifamily. I just don't know enough about it yet to say if that would. Key takeaway from multifamily is we work with service providers and make them actual service costs. So next slide, please. The last one, I think, Scott, this is probably my last one before I pause. This is some of this has been surfaced a little bit in what we'd be asking for in the agreements with service providers. So minimum standards, worker health and safety, labor standards, insurance and licensing. We want to make, if we're entering into agreements, we want to make sure they're licensed and can actually operate and their drivers have the correct driver's licenses. Data reporting, Jake, to your point, data reporting, and I guess to couple folks, Liz and Carolyn as well. I know data reporting is not going to be super easy, but we are going to require some data for transparency and efficiency of the system. Cost transparency, we do need to make sure that they aren't double charging a household. We'll need to make sure that they aren't billing CAA for 1,000 households, but they're only giving recycle carts to 100 of those 1,000. So we need some insights into the data to make sure, into the cost submissions to make sure it's verified. Minimum collection standards, equivalency, frequency of collection, equivalency standard, minimum recyclable lists. Those are all from the state statute and needs assessment. So those are things that are laid out. Contamination, containerization, also some of the standards we'd be looking at. And then destinations, delivery of recyclables to registered processing facilities. This could be a transfer station or direct to market. I'm not sure if there's not much going on, but probably mostly moves. And no minimum recyclable list materials in the landfill. We want to make sure they aren't just dropping them off in the landfill and sending them to the next spot. I will pause there, Scott. I know that once again is a ton of information to drop relatively fast, but we've got hopefully a little time for questions.
Yeah, thank you. So we can go to the next slide. And these are some of the questions that you'd like. So some, again, is any questions you all have about the information presented. And then there are questions here that you can read while your colleagues are making comments or asking questions. Typically, I'd read them through, but that might take a little bit too long right now. So Rick, your comment and question, please.
Yes, for Cater, Swordfish Consulting, Murphs. Open market, I thought we said was 56% of the overall market, or somewhere in that. It's a big group.
So let's stop there. So Yuri, is that right? Yes, thumbs up. Okay, you got it.
Said it's 56% of the state population resides in open market areas.
And so what I heard you say is in those open markets, you're not going to go out to RFP and go to fair and competitive markets. You're going to identify a number through some kind of formula, and you're going to offer that number to haulers in that 56% area, and you're going to give them a take it or leave it kind of approach unless they can qualify why they think they need more money. Is that how this 56% is going to work?
That's a pretty good description of it, Rick, in the nutshell. And the hope is that, say we're in like Adams County, unincorporated Adams County, where I know there's a number of different haulers operating, that there's a market clearing price there, we offer it, that multiple haulers operating in that region would accept that market clearing price, and then they'd be able to offer all of their customers no cost recycling service. Then we could work on the education outreach component, say, all of the haulers, these haulers operating in this region offer recycling for no cost. And so there's access to any household that chooses to sign up with one of those open market service providers that offer no fee recycling.
Sorry, and maybe I just add one additional thing, Rick. So we are saying as well that the first part of what Yuri had discussed was contracted with the municipality. So if a municipality potentially wanted to tender out their area for collection, we would work with that municipality to move towards a tendered contract for that area.
Okay.
Because I believe is that CA, we can't come into any market, open market area and tell a household they have to sign up as a hauler. We don't have the authority. So even if we contracted out and said, okay, we're going to release a bid for this area, we can't get any household to sign. We can't get any household necessary to sign up or compel payment or any of that stuff. It's really up to the local jurisdictions on whether or not they want to do licensing or contracting. It's their choice, or keep it open market.
Right. And one last point. So you mentioned earlier that there was you can't force a hauler to participate, but if they don't participate, they lose that volume or potential volume. But let's say they're a huge organization and they could eat some costs. could they then offer recycling at zero cost and start siphoning off recycling to meet their needs? Do you know where I'm going with that, Yuri?
So let me just try to understand, Rick, just make sure I understand. Are you suggesting potentially that a market player might take a low clearing price and basically take the hit to monopolize the marketplace?
No, they might decide that they could, they have a facility, they make good money on recycling, the blended value is up. They could, if they could juice up their collection rate a little bit, they may be able to offer recycling at zero and not have to be reimbursed for you. You know what I mean?
They wouldn't need to be reimbursed by us at all?
No.
We can
Think about
force,
blended values currently what, 140, 150 right now? So side conversation. I just
Yeah,
want to
maybe that's where this goes, because I think where Pete was leading was where my mind went in terms of you know, the monopoly, but I'm not sure if that relates here at this point. But sounds good, great questions. Thank you. We'll move to Gail. Not Gail, you're on mute.
Thank you, Gail Gary, Steamboat Springs City Council. And I'll just add a little bit of texture and context as you think about this and as you move forward, and I'll be happy to, have an offline conversation as well. But I think when you look at the rural areas, they're obviously much different than the Front Range. Here in Routt County, it's 500 square miles. We have all sorts of different, scenarios in terms of the various different communities. In our community, we do require recycling. We are kind of in a transition with providers at this point, but we had, 3 different providers. We had a local MRF. We had a provider that takes recycling to the Front Range. We had a hauler that takes the recycling over to, Eagle County. So, I throw that out there as you think about it in terms of, doing something on whether it's on a regional basis. From a Routt County perspective, there's not recycling within the county, and we have 4 different jurisdictions, 4 different, local municipalities. They all have different requirements as well. I think we have a single hauler in one of the communities. As I mentioned, we're an open market. We do require, recycling. We also require commercial recycling, which includes multifamily. And I guess finally, we require reporting on a quarterly basis. So, just a lot to think about as you think about this in the context of, the rural communities.
yeah, that's a excellent input. Yeah, happy to talk offline too. I do think, we didn't really talk very much about hauler licensing, but that is a really strong tool that communities can choose to do to say in an open market, you can still be open market, but everyone operating the open market must provide recycling service. And then CA can do the reimbursement because they're providing recycling service. So I think there is some overlap, but CAA cannot we can't invoke a license. It's up to the local jurisdiction to choose. I think there might be some opportunities there to increase participation and access faster.
Thank you. Liz?
Thank you, Liz Chapman, the nonprofit sector Recycle Colorado. So one of the comments I have in relation to the challenges you anticipate in reporting multifamily costs and service data, it has occurred to me during this conversation that if you maintain a per household metric, even for the multifamily complexes, that might solve 2 issues. It might incentivize the service provider to get more participation within that multiple housing complex because of the increased density of materials and the increased possible reimbursement. And then it also would allow a mechanism for estimating mixed loads. So as has been pointed out before, Rick, today, multifamily complexes are frequently combined on routes with commercial complexes because of the equipment needs, because it's all dumpsters and they need a front load dumpster truck to service them. And if you had a per household figure that was being asked for reimbursement, that would then allow CAA and the service provider to provide an estimate of how much material in that load came from the number of households serviced based on some standardized reporting of how much waste is generated per household versus a commercial entity. So that is just a comment that I would throw out there. One of the questions I had related to what Gail was just talking about in terms of rural areas, although I suppose it would also apply in urban areas. We are a state that is subject to severe weather events, fire, flood, and that often can cause transportation costs to dramatically escalate unanticipated. So for example, there was a period of time in Aspen where trucks had to drive 6 hours around in addition to the regular 2 hours. So it was an 8-hour truck ride to get recyclables from the Roaring Fork Valley to the Denver Front Range. And obviously you can't just build in contingencies like that to your market clearing price, but that is something I would encourage you to consider, having a pathway for those events, for those particular circumstances, when for circumstances beyond their control, their actual costs of providing service dramatically increase. And that's primarily, I think, a rural concern, but the Front Range is not immune to fire, as we have just witnessed. And then your question about an appropriate boundary or market clearing price region, I would defer to the hauler representatives on the panel, but my initial thought to that is it should be based somewhat geographically and based on what are the geographic barriers of getting the material moved from place to place. A bit like a waste shed or a watershed perhaps might be a place to start drawing those boundaries.
So Liz, that's super helpful. Appreciate those comments. I think specifically on the severe weather and fires and other issues that may dramatically increase costs. I mean, we are trying to add in some elements to make sure that we at least deal with fuel escalation adjustments and CPI adjustments. We want to obviously have a stable sector to provide servicing. We don't want to create challenges on that side. Need to take away and think about how potentially we might build in some kind of other adjustment. I mean, maybe that's something that's sort of contract written and dealt with on a case by case scenario. It's hard to build in a sort of worst case scenario, not knowing what the situation's going to be. And these days it feels like those worst cases happen more than we'd like them to. Something for us to take back, but certainly I think we are looking to all of you as well for good ideas. So if there are areas that things like that you can bring back where you've got advice from some of your members around, that would be helpful for us to get feedback. I don't know some of the municipal folks on the call if they've included some of those types of things in their contracts that might be helpful for us to understand as well.
Okay, so Barrett has a question here, and then I'm going to ask if anyone else has one or if you'd like your break. What is the proposed size of the market clearing price per regions, per county, 2 to 3 municipalities?
We haven't proposed one yet. Right now, I don't anticipate that's going to be by city. I don't think it's an individual one by city. Where I'd like to go, and we're investigating whether or not we're investigating how accurately we can do it, is that it'd be like archetypes that, perhaps like the North Metro is a larger region and it has a market clearing price that works because there's similar demographics, collection factors, and cost elements that allow us for a larger market clearing price. Whereas we might have a smaller market clearing price or more of them in rural areas or mountain areas. I could also foresee a scenario where we have similar market clearing prices that are geographically disparate. Like it could be the same market clearing price in the northeast part of the state or a mountain community and the southwest part, and they actually have similar demographic factors, even though the geographies are separated by thousands of miles, maybe hundreds of miles. Yeah, I'd seek some more input on it. I don't anticipate that's by county. It's going to be, yeah, I'll fill you in more as we continue our thinking.
Great. Thanks, Barrett, for the question. Caroline.
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. Obviously a lot of juicy stuff to talk about in all of these. And this may be super obvious, but I just wanted to flag that in the sense of all the data collection we were talking about before, I think this also likely, even for haulers that collect a lot of the data already, will require for them to categorize customers differently. And the connection point I have with it is in Fort Collins, we have tried to collect multifamily specific data, knowing just like routes cross jurisdictional lines that multifamily and commercial are collected together, but we were still just trying to get a sense of, even just ask the haulers, like, can you estimate or can you? And when we started asking more details, we realized that there was a lot of inconsistencies of whether they even had sort of categories to track multifamily customers separate than commercial, if their salespeople would identify a multifamily customer as different than commercial, or just lots of different sort of gaps within the system. And so as we're sort of thinking through ways to help everyone in the market prepare for these changes, how are we supporting clarifying the categories of information that will need to be tracked so everybody can start getting their systems lined up to that in advance as well.
Thank you for the comment, Caroline. Any response, Peter, Yuri? No? Okay.
I agree with what Caroline's saying, and giving the service providers time to get those systems ready is going to be integral. Yeah.
All right. Seeing no other hands raised right now, we're going to go to a break. I know it's been a little later today, but this is amazing discussion. Really, really good conversation. So we're going to take a break, and just Yuri and Pete, I've conferred with Darla here offline. And so we're going to take the producer dues slides, and we're going to do those next meeting. And when we come back, we'll go right to the service provider collaboration. All right. And with that, Brandon's gonna lead us into a break with some nice music or something.
Thank you, Scott. And before I do that, I just want to make an announcement for all members of the public. I've opened up the chat, so if you would like to sign up to speak during the public comment period, please send a chat to hosts and panelists with your full name and your affiliation, and I will leave the chat open until the public comment period begins. I do just want to note that the public comment period is not a time to ask questions, but rather to provide your feedback. If you have questions, please email them to eprcomments@state.co.us, and I'll put that in the chat. And enjoy your break.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone. And we're going to move to the service provider collaboration, as I mentioned before the break, and the issue of producer dues will be taken up on our next advisory board meeting. So with that, I will pass it over to Pete and Yuri.
Thanks, Scott. So we're going to talk about the requirements specifically to service provider collaboration. This is a larger section that deals with quite a few elements. So I've bolded the pieces that we plan to talk about today. So we're going to talk about utilizing and expanding existing education and outreach programs. We're going to talk about reducing contamination of covered materials delivered to MRFs and compost facilities. And we're going to talk as well about mitigating the impacts of covered materials on other materials and equipment at sorting and processing facilities. And again, we'll keep adding to this discussion, but these are relatively meaty pieces, so we'll deal with them in pieces to some degree. Next slide. So the first piece on utilizing and expanding existing education outreach programs, I think we are looking to consult and partner with service providers, local governments, tribal organizations, community-based, and other organizations to deliver recycling messaging. We're very much looking to leverage the resources, infrastructure, existing materials that are in place already. We are looking to develop and providing key messaging and customizable templates and image libraries and guidance for partners or organizations to use. We're going to work to try to move to more of a harmonized approach while also understanding that there are community-specific needs and circumstances. And so we've talked about some of those already. We've talked about the fact that there's differences in resort communities where you have seasonal populations that come in. We've talked about the fact that you have different cultures and language that are more predominant in certain parts of the state. So we understand we need to take those types of things in place, and we are looking to the expertise within communities to know their communities and service providers to help deliver that messaging, and again, in a way that is customizable so that they won't have to drive necessarily core content, but can take templates that we've developed and alter them to their needs. We've looked at using the same types of broad range and tools and approaches that are currently being used by service providers and local governments, and also not-for-profits that they are using in place to drive the messaging throughout Colorado. We will look at new types of approaches and new tools, but the idea is to build off the current base that's there. Next slide over. The state does require CAA to have a funding mechanism to cover the direct and indirect costs associated with statewide education and outreach. So we are looking to reimburse those entities that are already potentially providing education and outreach currently right now. And I've talked about who those types of entities are. We would be looking for mutually agreeable terms around that, likely based potentially on a per household basis, or for a multi-sector or multi-residential building, potentially that's per unit basis. We are currently looking at performance metrics, and that would likely deal with some of those aspects that we've talked about: contamination rates, set out rates, participation rates, making sure that the messaging is clearly getting through to local residents about their opportunities to be able to properly manage materials and increase the amount of materials that are being diverted into responsible end markets. Next slide over. We've talked about education, so I can stop and answer any questions on that side, but I think we've largely talked about many of those things already. I'm going to talk just a little bit around measurement of contamination at compost facilities specifically, and I don't know if this is the area where Clinton wanted to ask some questions, so I'm happy to stop after this slide. We are looking to get participating compost facilities to report on contamination, inbound contamination they might be receiving as part of their the source separated organics that they are receiving. We are looking to refine the definition of contamination to focus specifically on covered materials that are obviously not certified compostable materials. I think we're really trying to focus on what potentially impact is that system. So there are going to be other types of contamination that might flow through your facilities. There could be hoses and mattresses and who knows what else that somehow make their way into the system that obviously compost facilities don't want in their system, but we want to try to make sure that we're measuring specifically the covered materials because we're trying to remove those covered materials from your facility, and we want to make sure that we're measuring that accurately as to showing some kind of decrease over time. We're looking potentially at establishing a standard methodology for visual contamination audits for covered materials. We are seeking feedback from compost facility operators as the best way to do this because I think we're seeking to understand what is currently done, but we need a way that is standardized across the sector so that we're getting a clear measurement of the contamination that are coming into those sites. And we are looking then potentially at a standardized method as well as we move forward with that standardized method to look at offering training and tools to help facilities to audit materials to improve the quality and the consistency of the information that we're receiving back. And maybe I'll stop there because I think that Clinton wanted to weigh in. There are some questions that we had as part of the consultation process that I've included on the slide. But I think we're trying to make sure that we understand if there's concerns around the approach and whether there's other suggestions. Clinton?
Can I first say it's complicated? So Clinton, A1 Organics. So one thing I wanted to point out, Peter, is the evaluate materials by weight or volume and record data. And I know you mentioned on that meeting we had yesterday that there was an Ontario study that had a 0.2%, I believe, by weight of compostables in the stream on average. I think that's what that quote was from Ontario.
It's in an upcoming slide, but just to be clear, this is producers reporting the amount of materials, covered materials in Ontario that are supplied into the marketplace. So it is 0.2% of all of the covered materials that are reported in that are considered certified compostable.
Yeah, and the reason why I bring it up is because I'm bringing up the metric. Yep. And like another good example is BioCycle has done a study, and there's multiple studies out there that you can reference, but they give a really good example of volume versus weight and how really important it is, because in their study by volume it was, and they were talking about compostables in the stream, and by volume, and this can be with contamination too, you can take both and compare them, but it was 16% by volume of plates in the stream, just say plates, but by weight, it was 0.9%. So it's the same thing, like a little bit of contamination by volume, not, or a little bit of contamination by a little bit of weight, the volumes can be significant depending on the type of contamination. And that's what I'm really like, I don't want people to minimize it.
So I don't think the point is to minimize it. I think the point is the way that producers work in every jurisdiction is based on weight, not based on volume. So producers report on weight that's supplied into the marketplace. They don't report on what's supplied or what's or volume that's supplied. The point in the slide is really to articulate that certified compostables make up a small amount of the overall packaging materials that are supplied into the marketplace. We don't know what amount that is, but I think it's a context setting as to understanding exactly potentially the contribution of those materials into the system. The question of contamination within the compost stream, I don't think the point we're looking at is it 5% by volume or by weight or 9% by volume. I think the point is really to track clearly what is it going up or is it going down? I think that we're not trying to make the argument, Clinton, to say that one is ideally you don't want any contamination into the organic stream because you want that material to be clean and used. So I don't think I necessarily have a large perspective on weight versus volume. Weight's easier probably to measure. To make sure that there's greater accuracy. Typically what I see in waste audits is always typically a weight-based factor around contamination. But certainly we're open to have a conversation on it. At the end of the day, we want to make sure whether it's weight or volume, the trend is down.
Right. And if you're inspecting for contamination in the stream, you're also basically sorting the organic stream. You're doing the same thing. You have to, in order to inspect and measure contamination in a large load of organics coming to a facility, you have to sort the organics. And then that's how you're going to be coming with a measurement, because you need to remove the contamination from the stream. So when you say, how do you evaluate the contamination? I mean, you have to sort it. And the best and most effective way to remove contamination currently in organics is manually. I mean, you can use other devices, mechanical devices, but not in the residential curbside stream that potentially is going to be co-mingled with a whole bunch of organic yard trimmings. You can't put that into a deep pack. You can run it through a trommel, but you're going to take all the compostables out with it. So the most effective way is to manually pick through it all and try to determine the level of contamination. So like that's one way I would say that's how you're going to figure it out, because you got to get it out. You got to take it out.
Sorry, is your suggestion that instead of a visual audit that there is an actual waste composition audit that's done to measure contamination?
Like at A1 Organics currently, because we don't have depackagers, we don't have trommels, we're not running all this stuff through. I mean, we're trying to remove contamination at the end of the stream, or after the processing of the material, we're trying to get it out, but we know that provides still a level of micro contamination. And at a certain level, it's too much. You can't get it out that way. So what I'm saying is on the front end, we will visually inspect a load, and within a certain amount of time of us visually inspecting it, we will know very quickly if there's a level of contamination in that load that's unmanageable. And we will then just immediately stop at that moment, because it's unmanageable. It's going to take too long. We don't have the resources, the type of contamination it could be, if it's glass, plastic, lightweight plastic, like you said, hoses, aerosol cans, propane tanks, TVs, VCRs. At that moment, diapers, I mean, at that moment, it's like, this This isn't good. It's
Clinton, can
so
I?
I know I'll
can I
go
ju-
off. I'll stop.
Can I jump in though?
Yeah.
Because Pete put 3 specific questions here, and I think the one question is, are you looking at the auditing? Do you have a preferred method for contamination auditing? Is it visual versus
Mhm.
so it's visual auditing, and then what is too much for your facility? They're going to need, what's too much for yours might not be too much for another. So, I mean, how do you, that just for experience, and so forth. How's there to have what would you recommend for them across the state for a preferred method for auditing?
Depends on the visual. Yeah. We start with visual inspection. Depends on the type of contamination that we're seeing.
Mhm.
It depends on the quantity based on the visual inspection. I think those are the 2 big ones right there. And
So
time is a
quantity,
big.
numbers of materials and so forth, because I think you heard before, they're looking to see whether or not that contamination goes down, hopefully to 0, but if, it goes down, so they'll need to have an objective measure in order to evaluate
Mhm.
the process over time.
Okay,
So,
well, I don't
yeah.
want to drag this out because
No, it's
like
something
you've heard it's
yeah.
challenging because of the type of
Right.
contamination. If you told me it's a 6-pack of glass bottles that's
Yeah.
been shattered through the load, done. The load's gone. We're not going to accept it because we can't get that glass out currently in the technologies we have. But if it's a bag of trash or multiple, and we can walk up, grab, pull it out, holy cow, everything looks great, we move on. So it's like,
Yep.
it's not that subjective just to have a silver bullet to say, oh, this is how you're going to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds like
It's
a
hard. It's a real
discussion.
hard one.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a tremendous amount of experience here. And I think that I'm going to suggest a follow-up here in order
Yes,
to
please.
really get at what you're talking about, because that was a great example of the glass versus a bag or something like that. So Pete, any response, or Yuri, any response here before I go to Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are required as part of this of the statute to get participating compost facilities to report back to us on contamination. And I think what we're trying to do is find a balance of how do we allow compost operators to do it in a sort of standardized way that isn't going to break the budget, because we know if we said we're going to take or we want you to do audited composition audits of select loads that come in, that could become very expensive to do. So how do we do it in a way that ensures that their information is coming back to us so that we can start to see our education programs working, are some of the investments that we're making actually resulting in better outcomes? And so I think that's the balance we're trying to achieve. And obviously you guys know your facilities and your operations better than we do. And so we're just trying to get some feedback to say what is reasonable on this side. And so, the team internally is trying to have this conversation, and that's why we started with a visual type of contamination audit, because it's probably typically done, as you said. You're getting materials in and you're evaluating right away as to what that load is.
Yeah, and but visual is a challenge because, and Carolyn, sorry to jump back in there real quick, Clinton. A1 Organics, like, you don't know what's going to be hidden underneath. There's always a potential something. So visuals, it's an estimate, but it's not the best and most effective ways to completely go through the entire thing manually. And that's, like you said, not cost prohibitive. So honestly, like, advice, the best and most effective way to remove contamination is in the smallest volume at the source. That is the most effective way to get rid of contamination. And that's that.
Yeah, sorry, Clint. Sorry to interrupt again, but I take that point. I understand the intervention, but the point is that the legislation requires us to measure, to get facilities to report and measure on contamination.
Yeah.
So we need to deliver as part of that. I understand you're suggesting we need interventions ahead of time, but the legislation requires us to get facility operators to report. And so we need to figure out how to do that in a way that's acceptable.
I was reading what Barrett said right there. Yeah, visual inspection is important. I mean, another way I've seen people do is they will do it by a pick rate over a certain amount of time. Start picking, and every single time you get one pick, you start quantifying the pick. And if you get to, say, 50 picks, that's that level of contamination. You just keep going. But I'm telling you, it's going to have to be done manually. And if we use machines to do it, it's going to be commingled with other materials, and then you're going to have to try to figure out how to identify what's what. It's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, I think we've identified an area. We can go into it a little bit more here if there's if there's time for that, but clearly this is an issue to dig into more outside of this call. If I can, Caroline, if I can just read Barrett's comment here, since I know he has issues with the at the airport where he is. So Barrett says visual sampling and occasional grab samples could be reasonable for the best real-time data. Once a year characterization audits could be feasible, perhaps. Maybe longer depending on the facility and what is agreed upon per facility. So thank you for that, Barrett. And let me now go to Caroline.
Caroline Mitchell, City of Fort Collins. Clinton maybe actually brought up the piece I was going to bring into the conversation. I was going to suggest that perhaps PICS might be a unit to measure that could help, clarify the the whole big trash bag isn't as, it still just counts as one pick and you can just pick it up and get it out of there versus smaller pieces of other things. The additional layer I might add is that perhaps there could be some quantification for different types of materials of, for instance, in curbside recycling, sharps are like a no-go. You find a sharp in a load, you might throw out the entire load. And so perhaps in the world of contaminants for composting also, there could be different categories, say sharps and glass are in, red category, given higher quantities, however it's tracked together. Just some additional potential ideas to move the conversation along. But
thank you. That sounds like a great suggestion. My mind was trying to put it around it, and I think you've captured what I was trying to think of as well. Don't know if that's feasible, but looking at it as categories, numbers of picks here. Pete, I don't know if you want to prolong this anymore, or if you want to move on to another question.
I think that's.
I'm sorry, Clinton Sanders, A1 Organics. I just like Pete. This is I've beaten my head against the wall on this one. It's like we have to take a really deep dive into this conversation. It is an international challenge. It's not Colorado. And I think it has a lot to do with the system of commingling. It's not the same as recycling in a recycling bin in the organic stream because of how effective it is to the finished product. So I'll leave it at that. Maybe you just don't put these things in the same bin, because that's one of the bigger problems and challenges, because you can't separate it. You can't source it back out later. Just leave it at that for now. Sorry.
No, good comments. Okay. We're going to go Liz, and then Rick. Clinton, do you still have your hand up for another comment, or no? There you go. Liz, and then Rick.
Thank you. Liz Chapman, the nonprofit Recycle Colorado. I would make a comment that, as I understand how CAA is attempting to roll out this program, there will be a component of education that will hopefully address contamination to help reduce it. And there will be some effort with the to identify contamination before it makes it to the processor. I think that's also in the plan. So let's hope with all of these efforts, the identification of contamination at the processor is a moot point because it's so little, because we have fixed everyone. I would also put into the mix, not only would it be useful to identify per pick, but also the economic impact of said contamination. For example, it's not just the picks, but in the example that Clinton just raised of having to take an entire load and move it from the compost facility to a landfill because it is too contaminated to process, that's not going to be captured in a PICS measurement. That's going to be captured in an cost impact to deal with the contamination measurement. And so I would suggest that that be part of the data collection that you're asking for from these processors.
And Liz, do you remember, so rejected loads, sort of like a category of rejected loads, is that what you're thinking? We'd have a...
I would say that that is one category that's probably the easiest to imagine, but there are other categories that cause the entire equipment apparatus to be shut down and hand cleaned and everything removed, which is a much more expensive thing. Yep. And if the contaminant wasn't identified early enough and it makes it through a certain distance through the system, that cost is so much higher that, again, won't be measured in PICS. I think that's a good measurement. I think that's a good way in a standard form, but I think there should also be an element of saying, we got a load and then we found out that there was insecticide broken throughout the whole thing, and that caused us to have to clean our equipment and move the whole load to the landfill.
So cost implications with a number on it, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
So let me just ask a question on that, because I know we are the organization responsible for packaging. So you might be rejecting loads. I know Carolyn talked about needles. You're talking about potentially solvents or other materials that aren't caught under the program. And so I guess my question is, we're trying to deal with one part of, I think, what the larger concern is around contamination. And we're trying to measure against to make sure we're reducing that one aspect. We don't have producers of insecticides as members. We don't manage those materials. So I guess my only concern is that then we're starting to measure things that we have no control over.
Agreed, Peter, and I'm not suggesting that CAA be financially responsible for that. The question was consistency in reporting, right? And I think that those are the kinds of things that you want to include, and it may well result in, here is our report on contamination. A, B, and Z can be traced back to a packaging issue, whereas C, D, and Y were other issues, but they all fell underneath us tracking contamination, because I think it is going to be, and Clinton, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's hard to envision a scenario where the compost processor in the field evaluating contamination is going to be able to differentiate, if they are tasked with a systematic review of contamination, they're going to be capturing all the causes of contamination, not simply the ones CAA is particularly interested in.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying is you have to sort the load. You're going to sort and you're going to find all the contamination. Hopefully there's no contamination. But like, go Liz. I can't wait till you get there. But yeah, like you're sorting all the loads to try to find what you're looking for. And one thing I wanted to add to you guys is like the type of manual picking and measuring and that type of thing. We live in Colorado. We have snow, we have rain, we have severe weather. It's not something that you can do out year round outside on the ground without the right facility, the right infrastructure to protect your employees and your staff and to hold on to retention, employee retention.
Okay, we just looking ahead, we're coming into the last 15 minutes here of the meeting. We have 3 signed up for public comment that I know of. So I want to make sure that we have the time for that. So we're going to have to continue this conversation on our next call or perhaps between, but we can talk about that after. Great conversation. Rick, you're up.
Yeah, real quick in the recycling world, and I know Clinton, we're kind of different, but we are affected by film, lightweight materials that, as Liz said, treat and react differently in our facility and our stream. But Pete, when I was with huge organizations and we had over 100 MRFs, we had these probability and statistics gurus come in, and they had methodologies that we would dump a load on the tip floor. They would identify how many sort points in the pile we would pick, and they would provide us with some confidence level above 90-95% that the information we were getting was legit. No, I don't know if you can do that in compost because his pile is so much different than ours, but it seemed to work for us as long as we had a good methodology in place.
Thanks, Rick. That's helpful. I think we're having some of that internal conversation, I think, as well, which is we are certainly looking right now in Oregon and in California at actually doing hiring a third party to do the auditing around MRF contamination so that they have a standard approach, standard amount of samples that they're going to go out and do for MRFs. I think there's potential we could look at something similar for both MRFs and compost facilities in Colorado. I think there's a legal question. I guess the legislation says that the facility needs to report on contamination. So there's, I guess, some question on that side, although I think there's some interpretation potentially that would allow potentially us to do that for, but maybe that's another approach we could look at to apply again, a third party coming in to do those spot audits to get that information back to assess sort of, impact and whether levels are going up or down. So something to take back and think about. And I know that we're probably at time, Scott. So
so let's go with one more comment here, and then
keep
we'll
it
have
short.
the public comments. And if we have, time for another question and comment, we can squeeze that in. Clinton, please.
Yeah. Well, just to speak to the visual representation of the pile. When we made our changes, speaking from A1 Organics, we made our changes in the stream. Visually, we saw a reduction in contamination. So we were able to identify, hey, these changes are making a difference. And yes, visually, we are seeing a difference. But it's not not precise, Peter, but visually there was a difference. This was making a big difference in the stream. So.
Okay. Great discussion. I sorry to have to break it up here. We have marathon runners here on EPR discussions on packaging. So I'm going to move now to or hand the baton briefly to Brandon, who will take us through the public comment period. Brandon.
Thank you, Scott. We are now at the public comment period of the meeting, so we will call on members of the public in the order in which their requests were received. Since we have limited time, we will only allow 2 minutes for each comment, and we encourage commenters to focus on topics discussed during this meeting. Please again note that the public comment period is not a time to ask questions, but rather a time to provide your feedback. If you have questions, please email them to eprcomments@state.co.us, which I just put into the chat. So our first public commenter unfortunately had to leave the meeting early, and that was Martin Schmidt. So I'm going to read Martin's comment. So Martin Schmidt, Assistant County Manager for Public Works of Gunnison County. As a government, I would prefer quarterly billing, just like most state grant and loan programs. Our next public comment is going to come from Chris Pichet. Chris, please say your name, affiliation, and provide your 2-minute comment.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Pichet. I represent here RPM Eco, which is we are a service provider in Canada. We recycle and proceed chemical containers, automotive containers through a pro. And lately I participate to Next Cycle Colorado, and I introduced AI software that is being used in Canada for collection data. And cool fact about this that recently through the Next Cycle channel, we talking with stakeholder in Colorado now to launch a pilot project. So hopefully we're going to be able to have something live going on prior to the launch of the program in Colorado, and we'll be happy to share those results. And I believe that data collection is very important. So there's tools out there, so it's doable. Regarding also, there's another point that was interesting today, talking about certification. I will go on a certification of sustainable certification, and instead of focusing on just one aspect of it, I would go for the whole supply chain, meaning the collection, the proceeding, the PCR content into those containers, where it's from, and the weight collects also. And again, I believe that people around that table knows a couple of those kind of certification I'm talking about, and that'll be nice that it would be all across the states and not just in one state in particular, since CA has been it's everywhere right now. Also, the data exchange between the owners and the pro and everything, that could be part of the potential service agreement consideration that you guys put up. It would be interesting to do such project prior to go to that potential service agreement. Thank you for your time, everyone. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Chris. Our next public commenter is going to be Dustin Mays. Dustin, if you can please unmute, say your affiliation, and provide your 2-minute feedback.
Yeah, my name is Dustin Mays. I own and operate a company down here in Colorado Springs, and there's a few things that I'm slightly concerned with. With the extra growth from the recycling, because people are going to see this and they're going to see free, and they're going to want to jump on board. With the extra growth, I'm slightly concerned about the cost of the extra carts, if that's going to be incorporated in it somehow, how you can recover those funds. And then to recover the cost of doing business here, you guys are talking about pushing things out possibly 6 months, a year, or a quarter. And as a small business, and like many other small businesses, I'm not sure that some of us could last that long, because I mean, my business alone, we're currently at a 45% recycle rate, and I believe we spend anywhere between $8,000 and $15,000 a month just to be able to take these items to the MRF. And that's just the cost to dump it. That's not the cost of labor, the trucks, the insurance, everything else. I just wanted to point that out. And then with the contamination that Clinton's talking about with organics, I'm slightly concerned about that too, in the recycling portion of things here. Because a lot of these people, you can tell them all day. We put signs on the trash cans. We try and call people. They have kids that don't read the things. They have kids that aren't taught. I have a feeling you guys are going to run into a lot of contamination. we're all going to run into a lot of contamination issues here. So I'd like to know where the funds are going to come from to dispose of that stuff and how it's going to be handled. And I believe that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Dustin. And our final commenter for today is going to be Brian Loma. Brian, if you could please unmute, say your affiliation, and provide your 2-minute feedback.
Good afternoon, board panel, everybody. Today, my name is Brian Loma. I own and operate Cut the Plastic Environmental Mitigation Solutions, and I am on a contract with Green Latinos here in Colorado. I've really enjoyed this robust conversation today, and a couple of thoughts that I have to add to the conversation. Contamination and non-covered items have been discussed extensively today. And I think that part of the process of recording and tracking these items allows us to consider how EPR is living as a process so that additional materials can be legislatively removed from items that can be sold in the state. Assessing items of contamination can also allow the PRO to consider additional items in the minimal recyclables in the fees for production or inclusion into the waste streams. And regarding the tracking of waste pickups and the infrastructure of software that Liz brought up earlier, I cannot express how much as farmers in the United States have geo-tracking to the seed, the output that comes, the water produced for their farmland, that the tracking shouldn't be as integratable for waste streams. We know that major haulers are already using cameras to track site location, geo-tracking, where contamination of non-recyclables, bagged trash, things like that are entering the trucks with video and geo-tracking. And so receiving and uploading that system of material information to be able to ease the process for tracking and recording seems quite logical. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you to all of the members of the public who have given comment today. We will compile all the comments received and include them in the meeting summary. As a reminder, you can always submit written comments as well as questions at any time by email to eprcomments@state.co.us. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Scott for the meeting summary and next steps. Go ahead, Scott.
Great. Thank you very much, Brandon. And thanks for all those comments. I want to thank all of the speakers for the presentations today. Thank the advisory board members for their questions and comments as well. And we're at that time in the meeting to recap, talk about next steps, and then to adjourn. So PSI will be drafting up notes to this meeting from today's call, and we'll flag any follow-up items needed. We'll also, as we do, have the advisory board comments listed with and get responses back to you. The meeting materials will be posted on the department's webpage within the next few days, and Brandon has posted the link in the chat. The next technical work session will be on August 29th from 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Please join us at our next scheduled advisory board meeting on September 11th from 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Members of the public, stakeholders, thanks very much for attending today. I also want to thank Tanya and Valentina for their translation services here. I think, kept them on their toes the whole meeting. I don't know how they do it with all the technical information to translate and the different speeds of speakers. But I want to thank everyone for attending today. We value your participation and partnership, and appreciate you've taken time out of your day to be part of this meeting and developing this program. You see, we're getting into areas that we have not covered before, probably in the United States. So it's very exciting in one hand and very complex, as we all see, but we're all making progress and frankly making history here. So we hope that you'll continue to stay connected and share the details of this program with others. So I'll close by, again, thanking all of you, grateful for your input, and stay tuned. So it's now time to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn from this group? Gail, you're unmuted. Go for it.
I am Gail Gary, Steamboat Springs City Council. I will motion that we adjourn our meeting today.
Great, thank you. Do I hear a second? Jake.
I'll second.
Okay, any opposed? See, we wear you out, so then you're all just like unanimous here at the end. Thank you very much for that. And I will officially say that the 29th Producer Responsibility Advisory Board meeting is now adjourned at 3:28 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.